welcome to the Science Fiction and Fantasy Factory. I'm excited to have Mr. James Kenwood, science fiction author. Welcome aboard.
Yeah, welcome. Thanks for having me, Mookie.
Thrilled to dive into your grim acres. So you have a unique perspective. And I found you on Substack, where you have a voluminous archive of writing. Looks like you have been busy. And as I mentioned, you have a particular style and focus. So what I've seen, we are creatures who struggle, who fight. We have limited resources, and we have a checkered past, to say the least, and we remain a violent species. You explore that darker side from a political angle, from a cultural angle, a technological angle, and I found your writing intriguing. So do you want to share with our listeners, if you can encapsulate your style as a kind of pitch? Let me give you the mic. I'm going to shut up and I'm going to let you talk about your own work.
All right, thanks for that introduction. Yeah, I suppose my writing is a way of combining, on the one hand, sort of fiction ideas that I have and adventure and story ideas that I have with, on the other hand, a lot of the reading and research that I did growing up into military history. So something that I've always found fascinating is war. And it sounds like a very typical guy thing to say, but whenever you look at history and you look at any country, any period, socioeconomic circumstances, political parties, anything that's happening inside a country, if you start unpicking the knots and sort of unraveling the threads, everything runs back to the previous war. Like, what were you fighting over, and what did the post-war environment look like, and how did that then shape society? And then you start looking at, okay, but why were people fighting in that war? What was the main issue? What was driving it? And then you start seeing, oh, but this war was influenced by the previous war. So World War II, great example. Or if you flip it around, you get the unification of the German states in the 1870s. You get the First World War leading to the Second World War, leading to all the Cold War nonsense, leading to the War on Terror, leading to everything that's happening today. So for me, as someone who's very sort of structured and trying to understand things, which with politics and people is an impossible task, you sort of start at a point and then you sort of just try to unravel the spider web to sort of understand, why are people like this? What drives them? What makes them human? What makes us human, in a sense? And so after years and years and years of going through, chronicles of what caused wars and autobiographies from people who were in the situations, that's sort of my foundational background that I build upon when I start writing. And then in part also, when you study war and history like that, you start realizing that there are recurring human themes, themes of violence. Like you said before, we are a violent species. We like to pretend that we're highbrow and that we can master technology and things like that, and that we can appreciate art and music. But when things go south, people kind of revert to the law of the jungle. Always, we can try to be better, but when the chips are down, that's when the knives come out. And in my writing, that's something that I like to explore, is that idea of, if you get into those horrible situations, how can you make the best of it? Can you try to redeem yourself? Can you try and do something that saves yourself, or maybe saves not yourself, but your comrades? Or will you just become that violent, bloody monster that then ends up in a history book as a warning to the kids? So that's something that I really enjoy exploring with my work. I suppose that's the I suppose that's the short answer. I could go longer, but then we'll be here for 5 hours.
Well, let's go for at least an hour because again, I find the point of view fascinating. I'm sensing various tensions. Some of them are contradictory and some of them are complementary. So let me be specific. On the
Mm-hmm.
one hand, war can be futile in its repetitiveness and its lack of any real effect or implication. So, for example, let's look at Europe. Aside from minor differences, the map of Europe as it exists today isn't too much different than the map as it existed even in the 19th century because it's delineated based on race and language and
Mm.
culture. The populations have not shifted too much. My mother is from Transylvania, which is the Hungarian part of Romania, just to make it personal. And after World War One, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, after the Treaty of Versailles, was chopped up a little bit. But the population of what's called Erdély, from the Hungarian point of view, didn't really change. It hasn't really changed. It's still predominantly Hungarian, even though it's still within Romania. So, a consequence of all of this carnage was relatively inconsequential to the boundaries of Europe. You seem to showcase some of the futility of conflict, especially when it's recurring and it's so endemic. Now that is in stark contrast to some of the transformational change that actually does happen. You can argue that the evolution from medieval aristocracy, the fiefdoms of Europe, to true democracy happened very much as a product of these two horrible wars, the most damaging in history.
Mm-hmm.
In a sense, the same war with a little interregnum.
20-year
So
pause.
on the one hand, nothing has changed and everything has changed. And underlying all of that is what Freud called the Thanos effect or Thanatos, which is this death instinct that could be within us. And it could be social Darwinian in the sense of genetic drift and even the need to thin the population. It could even have an immunological significance. So you have these contrarian forces, you have this instinctual underpinning, and here I'm getting to your stuff. You have the individual who is thrown into this frothy mix of
Mm-hmm.
contradiction and paradox and almost Hegelian teleology. We're moving in some direction, even if it's zigging and zagging a little bit. Is that a fair backdrop for your writing? You've got Mars Fire, you've got Volta, you've got the Amenth Ra, you cover Egyptian style theocratic resurgence, colonizing Mars, and we bring all our baggage.
Yeah,
Am I getting closer to your portfolio here?
it's a bit of a mixed bag, to be honest. I sort of have two main branches of writing, if you'd call it that, two main avenues that I sort of push on at the same time. So, on the one side, I have the sort of, I want to say, the short story focus. Short stories, novellas, where it's 1,000 words, 5,000 words, maybe 13,000 words, like I've been pushing recently, where it's a single idea that I'm sort of exploring and pushing out. And those usually coincide with the weekly Sci-Friday on Substack. So Friday's coming up, and then on Thursday evening, I sit down and I'm like, oh man, I don't have anything for Sci-Friday coming up. Let's quickly write something. And sometimes it works. I'll sit down, I'll write 4,000 words in a night. I'll walk out of my room in a haze and not really know what time of day it is. And then the short story is done. And that will sort of be, I want to say, a standalone little encapsulation of an idea or of a mental image I had or some inspiration I had during the day. The recurring theme is always there. The call it the Grim Acres theme of it's war, it's conflict, what happens when people are pressed. The concept of sacrifice has been coming up a lot recently again. So that's kind of the one avenue where I write. And then the other avenue has been the specifically the Mars Fire novel. And the Mars Fire novel has a bit of a less action orientated focus. So with the short stories, it's specifically, like I said, it's like a one-shot little capsule. There's action, there's explosions, it's fighter pilots trying to get into orbit with, an escape shuttle. It's people ambushing a colony ship. It's a shootout on an alien world. It's very action orientated. And then I try to sort of sprinkle in a bit of a, maybe a lesson or something to think about. Or I love my ambiguity as well, which is what I work into the short stories. But with Mars Fire, it's a more of a political type development in the same vein as all the tension and all the socioeconomic pressures that led up to the big wars on Earth. So if you look at the First World War, kicks off 1914, assassination of the Austro-Hungarian prince, and then if you sort of start unpacking it, you sort of roll the timeline back into 1913, 1912, 11, you see the assassination did not just happen because someone was passing by and thought, hey, let's take a shot. There's a big build-up to the outbreak, and then once the rock starts rolling downhill, it just gets bigger and bigger and more damaging. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do with the Mars Fire story. It's very, I've been told by some of my proofreaders that it's very slow burn. But I'm intentionally trying to set a scene that is quite broad, because firstly, you have to anchor the reader in the reality of living on a Martian colony about, let's say, 150 years in the future. So it's the reality of the lower gravity, the fact that you're constantly in a spacesuit. You can't leave your habitat without the spacesuit. Radiation is a problem. So how do you deal with that when you're outside? How do you deal with that when you're inside? Exposure to sunlight is a problem, things like that. So I try to there's an element of hard science in that. But then there's also the reality of you have all these political powers on Earth, North America, the Confederation of European Nations, so it's a bit of a spin on the EU, and then the Asian Pacific Union, which is basically China today plus people around it. And all of these big Earth political powers have stakes on Mars. And all of them have very different ideas about what the future of Mars is going to look like and what it should look like. And then Mars Fire is basically written from the perspective of, you could almost say, cowboys, in a sense. It's these colonists and settlers that are living in the unregulated zones between the big powers. So they don't have any loyalty to the North American colonies. They don't have any loyalty to Europe or to the Asian Pacific Union. And they're just saying, they're like, listen, we are here, just leave us alone. We want to do our own thing. We want to live in peace. We want to run our own countries the way we want to. And then on their border, on their eastern border, they have this massive Union presence that's constantly encroaching and constantly stealing settlements and constantly using politics and all the nonsense that we see on TV, like the bad excuses that people use to do horrible things. My dad always used the expression, he said, people always have a good excuse for doing a bad job. And it's exactly what we see in politics. And that's exactly what I'm trying to bring into the Mars Fire story, where people there's this slow pressure cooker effect of people stuck in the middle. You can't go west, you can't go east. The enemy is on the doorstep. What are you going to do? So that's kind of the setting that I'm doing. And then in the middle of the book, when the war finally breaks out, then you get the reality of, okay, now the action picks up. Now we have the invasion fleets that are moving. Now the colonies get attacked. What happens now? And then there's a bit of a twist as well, which I cannot yet give away. And then things sort of get ramped up to the nines. But so the Mars Fire writing, just sort of to get back to the original point, is very much focused on make it real. If anyone reads Mars Fire, who has also been reading Earth politics and our history and wars here, anyone reading the novel will hopefully start recognizing similar strands and similar thinking and similar patterns. The way that people will say one thing and then do something else, or you do something and then you just deny it. I've taken a lot of inspiration from the X-Files, which I rewatch from time to time for for name suggestions, actually. and in the X-Files series, they repeatedly play on that note, or on that concept of, if you are a big, powerful organization or entity like the American government, or any government for that fact, you can do what you want, and then you can just deny it afterwards. If there's no evidence, if there's no proof, if there are no living witnesses to go to court, then no one can prove that you did something wrong. And that's something that I'm also trying to bring into into Mars Fire, into the novel as well. That idea of bad things are happening, and people know it's happening, but we can't prove it. And even when we can prove it, the bad guys just shrug and say, "Yeah, but this is AI. This is a doctored video. It's not real." And then how do you then, what do you do in that situation? You can't run, you can't fight. What do you do? So yeah, that's that. So yeah, getting back to the original question now, that sort of avenue that I'm exploring is very different from the short story setting. But then, yeah, those are I want to say the two main schools of thought, or the two main branches that I'm kind of working on with my writing. So do short and sweet on the one side, and then the sort of the long, complicated, crunchy development I'm keeping for the novel for now.
That's interesting from a different modality. So to summarize, your short stories are more action oriented with a little quirky kind of twist, and it's in the moment, and they're one-offs. And your bigger novel, Mars Fire, is a more political intrigue. Sounds a little Dune-esque. Dune had a lot of politics and war, a little bit of that epic flourish. But underlying the entire oeuvre is this notion of, and this is what I was hinting at before, the inevitability of conflict. And the typical expression of that conflict through violence, that we're heading toward a conflict that's irreconcilable to the point where we need to physically try to kill each other for limited resources. That's there.
It's actually funny that you mention Dune now, because Frank Herbert, I believe, was the one who said that. No, was it Frank? I'm not sure if it was Frank Herbert now, or if it was from
probably Robert Heinlein
from Starship Troopers, where he said, all political power comes from actual force. Like you can talk in the Senate as much as you want, and you can debate things, from your intellectual ivory towers as much as you want. But ultimately, it comes down to cavemen with sticks and stones who redraw the lines on the map. And
look at our American president now. He kidnapped the leader of a foreign country. And I used to live in Brooklyn, New York. I used to live only a few blocks where Maduro is now sitting in a jail cell. He's been forgotten pretty much. When is anyone talking about Maduro anymore? So might makes right. And I'm not being political. I'm merely reinforcing your statement that if you want control of the Western Hemisphere, you need to control the oil. And I would venture to assume that what's going on right now in the Middle East is a continuation of that might makes right trajectory. Is it regime change? Is it nuclear program? I think it's the oil. So, we have a goal and we go for it. So once again, I in no means want to be political to any of our listeners or to you, but I'm just reiterating your point that we're seeing it in action right now in very much a naked form, and perhaps even a more transparent and honest form, because this has been the modus operandi all the time. Only you have a lot of pleasantries that sometimes delay it. if it doesn't really get in the way, but we need to substantiate there's weapons of mass destruction before we invade a country. Now we don't even need to do that. We just kidnap their leader or drop bombs because we can. So I think that reiterates some of your theme there too, which is being an anti-Andy Weir. Andy Weir with his Martian, and now with Project Hail Mary. And both of these books had the essential theme that there was no antagonist except nature herself.
Absolutely.
And then if you are resourceful enough and smart enough and collaborative enough, then everything will be A-OK, which is why I enjoyed the book because of its problem solving, but I hated the movie. I'm one of the few people who have hated the movie
Outside
because
opinion here.
never once did I feel any dread or anxiety that the world was coming to an end. And that
Mm.
milk toast sentiment through the interactions with a Muppet in a habit trail didn't do it for me. So anyway, I'm contrasting that writer with you for the sole sake of highlighting your focus on this grim, dark perspective, if you
Mm.
will.
If you want to, if you want to extend that analogy, something like, I mean, I have a great deal of respect for Andy Weir in terms of his writing.
Yeah, I like them too. Don't get me wrong. I love Martian, and I enjoyed Project Hail Mary too, even if it was Pollyanna.
So the idea here is not to sort of dismiss it, but I think you need to. I think when you make a comparison like this, if you let's say compare The Martian to Frank Herbert's Dune, if you take The Martian and even Project Hail Mary as one as well, you can take this concept of you have a above average individual who goes to above average lengths in order to solve problems that are above average, which is a great theory if you're, and it's a great case study if you're focusing on an individual. You can always take a great individual from history and focus only on that one person and then look at what did they do, what did they overcome, etc., etc. You can sort of look at it in isolation as like a little case study that's nicely encased in glass and it's all beautiful. Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar.
The
Yeah.
hero,
Yeah, the hero between air quotes, because these days.
Indiana
Exactly.
Jones.
Yeah. But then the problem is we don't live in singular realities where you are the only person that exists and where you are the only person that gets to make decisions. Um, if you have a single character on screen, or 90% of the movie is a single character, that character makes choices and they have the freedom to make whatever choice they want because they are the only character on the screen. If you now contrast this with something like Herbert's Dune, you get a more, I want to say, realistic reality, at risk of sounding like I'm mangling my words there, but you get a more realistic setting of now we're not looking at an individual, now we are looking at groups of individuals. We're looking at societies and communities, people with different belief systems, people with different value systems, different morality, different religions. And now decisions start having friction because group A and group B cannot agree on values. And well, you get the religion that sort of drives a large element of morality, not all of it, but a large component of it. Your morality determines your values, and your values then determine your choices that you make. And that, to my mind, is the human experience. That's the human reality that we've always seen. We have friction in any of our societies when morality and values and decisions do not align. And for me as a writer, it's far more interesting to explore that, the interplay of reality, if you could call it that, even if it's when it's a fictional setting. It's far more interesting to explore that than to, on the other hand, construct this ideal man, sort of the Nietzschean Superman, who then goes through life, with a fluttering cape and, red underwear and just solves everything magically. It's a great story and it's very aspirational. Don't get me wrong. I mean, Superman was a great character for a very long time. But you cannot look at Superman and for one moment think that it's realistic. When you look at Superman, when you know anything about Superman, you know this is not real. We're not all like this, which is also part of the appeal. People like to look up to things. But I suppose there's also, on what I enjoy personally as a writer, is that idea of, if we put 10 guys together and they have to make a choice, if we have a colony with 100 people and they have to make a choice, how do you handle that? And something that I'm also exploring in the Mars Fire novel now, beyond the chapters that have actually been published on Substack, is what happens if you need to make a really tough decision that the community does not want to do, but it is for the best of the community, and no one wants to be the guy who pulls the trigger that gets things going. how does your character then step into that role? How do they then justify for themselves the deed or the action of stepping into that role and saying, hey, I'm going to put my hand up, I'm going to pull the trigger, and I will then have to live with the consequences.
To your point about Andy Weir's superhero being the problem solver of one, it has clarity and aspiration and problem solving finesse, but it sometimes lacks drama
Mm,
because it's very linear, and to your point, it's very individual. And the
mm,
real stuff happens when you have this amalgamated mess of conflicting interests and shifting alliances
absolutely.
that add layers of complexity and dimensionality to the drama, so that it becomes much more of an emergent phenomena than this linear A to B to C
Mm,
kind of reality. They each have their charm. It sounds like you like Andy Weir. I like Andy Weir too. It's super fun.
yeah.
But it's more of a comic book, a very, very smart comic book than real literature in a traditional sense.
I suppose you could look at it from a different angle as well, and you can ask yourself, what what is the story that I'm trying to tell, and what is the point of the story? Um, one of my recent stories, Eden Lost, I think it was from last month, it's about this young boy who basically, the entire story is focused on this young boy, Billy. And he goes through a series of experiences. There's sort of peripheral or surround, supporting characters, his family and so forth. But the story focuses on Billy, and we get to see Billy making decisions and then sort of growing up through the sort of the duration of the story. And at the end, Billy is no longer the child he was at the beginning of the story, and that's always interesting. Seeing the transformation, people dealing, this individual dealing with environmental pressures and challenges and things like that. So for me, I don't often write stories like that because it's, firstly, young adult focus. It's not really my thing. I outgrew that about 20, 25 years ago. But it's that, for me personally, was one of the closest times where I came to writing a character that was sort of, where it was very much just this one character that was doing things and experiencing things and making decisions that then had impacts. But I think, in reality, as much as media likes to glamorize the idea of the lone wolf who goes out and does things and gets the answer, or the Superman who goes out, flies into the burning volcano and saves the damsel, um, I think in reality those things are scarce. And if you want to tell a story where you set up a shining example, you write the knight in shining armor that we should aspire to. If that is your goal, by all means, write the story, write the Superman, red underwear and all, go for it. That's because that's the point of your story. You're trying to sell an aspirational message, and we need those. We absolutely need those. I personally do not enjoy these stories where everyone is morally gray, everyone has a horrible past, no one is good. I don't like those stories because it kind of reminds me of like a high school or a university level, just like social life. Everyone's messed up, everyone's kind of flaky, and I'm like, there are no obvious role models there, or no one to cheer for. And that's also one end of the spectrum of what I was discussing earlier about looking at the human condition. Is some people are of the belief that we do not have Superman, that we all are just plebs, and we're all just schmucks who do horrible things, when no one is looking. Some people firmly believe that, and that's then the stories they write. I always get a strong feeling from George R.R. Martin when I read his work, that he has a very, and this is a personal opinion, but I get this idea that he has a very dim view of what humans are capable of, because his best characters die, and then his sort of dubious characters, the gray ones that are very flaky, they then become the center of the story. And okay, if that's the message that you want to push, sure, but it's not an aspirational message. It's not Superman in the red underwear. So yeah, circling back to my original point, I think it really depends on what are you trying to sell. And I think you can take any story and you can sort of strip the layers away and then look at like, okay, what is the core message here? Um, and with my stories, the core message that I often try to, I want to say not push but present is, when you are challenged, you need to step up. And when you step up in these situations, you can, oftentimes you have to, be asked to make a sacrifice. It's easy to step up to something if there's no cost involved. You know, um, I want to do something, but I don't want to pay the price. That very call it the playboy attitude of, I want instant gratification. I want the big house, but I don't want to work for it. I want the flashy car. I don't want to work for it. I want a publishing deal, but I don't want to work for it. That mentality for me is dangerous, and it is also frankly immature. I think as an adult, we all get to a point in our life where we should realize that, if you want the gym body, you need to go to the gym. If you want the novel, you need to have the discipline to write regularly and produce solid content. If you want the solid career, you have to put the hours in. As adults, we all understand that. But then you encounter these people who feel, I want everything, but I don't want to sacrifice for it. I want to eat the meal. I don't want to pay the price. And that's something that I always want to explore. That's sort of one of the core messages that I always try to push in my stories, is that if you want the things that are hard, if you want the things that are worth getting, you have to pay the price tag. You always have to pay the price tag. You can't run away from that. And when you do, someone else ends up paying the price tag. And then you have to live with yourself if, whatever happens to that. And some people are fine with that because, you have the moral depth of a puddle. But for most of us with a bit more of a rounded character, you kind of start realizing at a certain point in your life that, my actions have consequences. And when I do the hard work, it comes out. So yeah, it's a very rambling answer now, but yeah, that's one of the things that I try to push with my work, is just get that idea of, if you want, the hard stuff comes with a price tag. And if you think it's worth it, then you pay the price.
So is your writing allegorical in that way? Are you operating off the precept that that is a moral imperative, which is essentially grow up, and then you play that out in your
I,
narrative? Is that
I think
fair to say?
I think it's probably a strong element. I haven't specifically thought of it as, sort of as condensed as you've just put it now. Um, but I think there is an element of that in my writing for sure. I personally have, in my personal capacity, I have a great deal of trouble dealing with immature people. When you meet people that don't want to take responsibility for their actions, people who want things, but like I said, they're not willing to put in the hard work or the long hours. People who just want, they never give. I have a great deal of trouble dealing with people like that, and it takes a lot of self-control and a lot of patience on my side to actually remain civil when dealing with people like that. Because for me, if I can sense that someone is immature, and you can sort of see it in their actions and the way that they talk and the priorities that they have, the things that they focus on, I become, confession moment here, it feels like a moment from Dr. Phil now, but I become a bit dismissive towards those people, because I feel like you might be of a voting age, but you're behaving like a child, and I cannot take you serious now. So yes, I think short answer, yes, that is an element in my writing that I want to push. I suppose is that message.
That's an interesting mirror to my own writing. So my science fiction novel, I did a debut science fiction novel last summer, published in June 2025, Johnny Fazuli and the Transfinite Reality Engine. A bit of a
Okay.
James and the Giant Peach kind of title. My anti-hero is exactly the type of personality who annoys you. He's narcissistic, dopamine deprived, hedonistic, impulsive, lazy, exhibitionist, hustler, con man,
Mm, mm,
gigolo, failed social media personality. extreme sports enthusiast addicted to sex and drugs and gambling, and
Mm.
that is Johnny Fazuli.
Johnny Fazuli sounds like a character.
The centerpiece of the novel, and he is a Gen Z or Zoomer American male.
Mm-hmm.
And his counterpoint is a Gen Z Zoomer American female who is conscientious, well educated, focused, hardworking. And their interplay is the backbone of the
Mm.
narrative. And in ways, it's a romance. And behind it all is a transcendent being, spoiler alert, a Boltzmann brain. So a spontaneously evolving consciousness in a dying universe who, because of her eternal age, gets a hold of the mathematical operators of reality itself.
Mm.
And she is angry because of her loneliness and isolation. She has reached out to other sentient beings, and like Alice in Wonderland, didn't have these social skills to maximize her self-interest, and is ransoming reality. And
Okay.
along the way has fallen for the most decrepit and most loathing being in reality itself, Johnny Fazuli. It's a love story. The reason I bring it up in that detail is because it's the antithesis of what you're describing in terms of
Mm.
creating an allegory for maturity, responsibility, taking charge. And
Mm.
what I'm trying to do through the mirroring is to highlight the challenges faced most significantly by our younger generation, and
Yeah.
also highlight some of the paradoxes and absurdities that ultimately, and I think this is part of the crossover, lead to conflict and war, and our inability or unwillingness to compromise and negotiate and get along. So what's interesting to me about your setup is you have a classical hero, like almost a Grecian ideal of Aristotelian nobility, and yet conflict is still inevitable, and
Mm.
the world is Darwinian, and I'm upside down. I start with the notion of the world being a unfair Darwinian jungle, and my solution to that is this moron who plows right through it with impunity and is somehow likable along the way, that we retain our humanity in an indifferent universe
Mm.
by being an idiot.
Well, it's like that old quote, like the the only sane response in an insane world is to be insane. You know, it's like that. That's if that's the only way you have to cope, then yeah, do the thing. Yeah.
Joseph Heller's Catch-22, which is to get out of the army, you need to substantiate that you're crazy. But if you're in the army and you're crazy, then that's normal. So you're
Mm.
not really
Yep.
crazy.
Yep. I remember reading that book.
But I find the juxtaposition fascinating. And to put a capper on that, the reason I chose this kind of trajectory is because I found it most dramatically interesting. So I
Yeah.
wanted to write the science fiction book that I always wanted to read. And my
Absolutely.
challenges with a lot of science fiction is that they tend to be world building focused, very
Mm.
elaborate in terms of the
Yeah.
constructs, two-dimensional, one-dimensional in terms of the characters and the trajectory of the hero or anti-hero. And they lack that organic, emergent drama, which makes for good storytelling and good reading and ultimately
Mm.
good writing. So
Yeah.
I went the wayward path of the despicable moron.
Listen, if it works.
And sounds to me like you are trying to have this archetypal embodiment of what constitutes maturity, responsibility, and facing up to the challenges that face us.
Hmm. I think something to be aware of though when looking at any type of like like you said, now the archetypal role model is the archetypal role model, much like the Andy Weir characters. They exist in isolation and they exist on paper and they look perfect on paper, like a great many things that look perfect on paper. I mean, communism, for example, looks great on paper. Reality, bit flaky.
Not so much.
Yeah. There's a couple of few 100 million dead people that would argue that point. So I think for me, the way I approach it is, if you have your archetype of what the good, strong man, or the Nietzschean Superman, or the Marvel Superman, whichever you want to call it, if you have that good archetype on paper, he cannot exist just in isolation. He always exists, to my mind at least, in the real world. And then the interest and the action and the drama and the intrigue and the love for the character then inevitably comes from, how does the archetype now interact with reality? You have Clark Kent, our Marvel Superman, boy from Kansas, I think. I don't know his backstory that well. Farm boy, very nice guy. But we don't love him and support the character because all of his amazing attributes in isolation. We fell in love with the character of Superman in how he dealt with reality then. And I think that is the interesting thing to explore. Like you said earlier, with people getting stuck on the world building, I think people get stuck as well on developing, this Mr. Perfect or Miss Perfect, whichever the character is, and then they fail to have that development and sort of the growth of the character in, how does this archetype now actually engage with reality? How do they respond to problems? How do they respond to situations that challenge their beliefs? Classical, and in my opinion also a bit of a silly example, the railway cart, where you pull the lever, the cart goes the one way, it kills one person. Pull the lever the other way, the cart goes the other way. Now you put that decision in front of Superman. What does he do? That's what makes it interesting, because you can spend 3/4 of the book telling me how fantastic Superman is and all of his archetypal strengths and all these beautiful things about him. But I want to see, what does he do when he's faced with a tram problem and he has to make that choice. That's where the character pops. And I think that's something that, as an author, we have to be careful with, is to not love your character to the point where you don't expose them to the tram problem. I want my character to remain pure and pristine and unsullied and never have to face the tram problem, because when you face the tram problem, that's when the real you comes out. Because now Superman has to explain, why am I pulling the lever to the left or to the right? And some people will agree with left and some people will agree with right. And that then is where I think the fans will have different opinions on it, obviously, but that's where the character becomes alive. That's where the character becomes human, because he pulls the lever to the left, and some of us will say, yeah, I understand that. I would have done the same thing. And other people would say, no, you should have pulled it to the right. I don't agree with that. And I think that makes the character human as well. As long as they're perfect and on their, in their ivory tower on the little pedestal, great. But that's a Wikipedia entry. That's not a story. It's not alive. So what I try to do with my writing as well, work in progress with Mars Fire especially, is, yes, have a strong archetype of what you think the character is, or what you want the character to be, but then also put the character in the mud and see how they react to that. What's the real fiber that comes out? I think that's the interesting story.
My Johnny Fazuli, he would not have to decide whether it goes left or right, kill the old lady or the mom in the baby carriage, right? He would try to sell the switch to the highest bidder.
Right.
He just does not care. So he tries to circumvent and take advantage of reality, and reality keeps kicking his ass because of his laziness, irresponsibility, narcissism, and addictions. So he is the anti-hero who tries to self-isolate in a sense. He's above it all. He's hedonistic, so he participates only when it benefits him. but it
Of course.
always backfires spectacularly because he is such a moron and he really does a bad job of even that. So in ways he's the Charlie Chaplin comic
Mm,
character
mm,
and he's the antithesis of Superman. I always thought Superman was a shitty character. And the reason is he has one vulnerability which is kryptonite.
mm, mm,
And as a viewer, as a reader, we are always forced to try to pick through that invincibility to find his humanity, which is almost a cliche and an afterthought.
mm, mm.
And it sucks the drama out of the narrative in such a
Yeah.
way. Johnny Fazuli is the opposite of a Superman who nonetheless considers himself a Superman. And in his self-delusion, the reader gets to laugh at him. And
Mm, mm.
and that becomes the endearing connection.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that is his true vulnerability, which is his overextension.
I must admit, I've not read your novel yet, but it sounds then like the reader sort of becomes the man behind the screen who sees actually the reality, because you have the posture of Johnny on the front, but the view from the back of the stage is very, very, very different. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm empowering my readers with that sense of criticism. And the reader in juxtaposition is, in a sense, the Superman. They come at it with morality, they come at
Mm,
it with values, they see the self destructive absurdity of his behavior.
mm,
But
mm,
through his shenanigans, it sheds a light on the absurdity of even the reader's point of view. And it calls into question, in a very postmodern kind of way, what constitutes civilization? What
mm,
constitutes appropriate and inappropriate behavior? And to your point, how do we define maturity in an
mm.
age of mechanized and now AI control and eventual destruction? What
I,
about the inherent hypocrisy in our values, highlighted through the lens of this moron who is
mm,
the
mm.
infatuation of a being with transcendent power?
Yeah, I like the little Skynet ending there, the AI and then the eventual destruct. Yeah, it's a good one.
I like this juxtaposition, and for the sake of listeners, you have two writers who've taken a very, very different tack toward their hero. And I think we're after pretty much the same thing, which is
Mm, mm,
exposing some of the fissures in society and history and
absolutely.
figuring out a way how we as individuals in the maelstrom of this collective insanity can keep our dignity, keep our values, and self organize in a way where we don't have mutual assured destruction and perhaps even make the most of the limited resources that we do have as a society.
Mm, mm, mm. Yeah, I think it's that you want to ask a question. At least from my perspective, the way I look at storytelling is you kind of inside the storytelling, and perhaps this is again the ancient Greek philosophical influence, but you want to ask a question that stays with your reader or viewer even after they've closed the book. You want that question to sit in the back of their head and sort of stay with them, even if it's just for a day or two. I think the worst thing that you can do, and we saw this in the past few years with the Marvel comic movies, with the whole Marvel comic universe, and you had every villain and
MCU.
I've actually blocked it out of my brain because I just got so sick and tired of seeing this on, like, every 6 months was a new show.
With 100 characters so that they could sell the franchise, and then
Yeah,
the spin-off of the spin-off, and then the
yeah,
retroactive spin-off with the new Superman, which replaces the old Superman with a
yeah.
new character and more advanced CGI.
And a reboot of a rewrite of a redesign of a reimagining, and it doesn't end.
Deadpool, at least the first one, where it makes fun of itself, so you get a little
Yeah,
meta.
Yeah, yeah.
break down the fourth wall, and then you have a little bit of fun with it until that becomes its own cliche.
Exactly. Yeah, because then you get people who take Deadpool serious, and it's like, guys, please don't take, if you're going to take anyone serious.
I love it when they miss all the self-reference and they don't get the joke.
Yeah, people not getting the joke is that's a 2-hour podcast on its own. I think. But yeah, so the point that I was trying to make here is that I think the worst thing that we saw with all of these MCU shows popping out one after the other was it was a buzz and it was a rush, and special effects, explosions, sounds, witty one-liners. Everyone's a smart ass. Everyone always has the perfect comeback lined up. And 30 minutes after walking out of the cinema, it's out of your head. There's no enduring question. There's no thought about, hey, what did this change? And I'm not saying, just for clarity, I'm not saying that every piece of literature that we produce must be a soul-altering, mind-expanding, visionary piece of. I'm not saying that. I'm absolutely not saying that. Literature comes in different shapes and sizes. It fills different holes, different needs. I get that. But it bothers me personally when the dominant flavor is something that bright lights, loud explosions, funny one-liners, and 30 minutes after the cinema, after the lights come on, you've already forgotten about it. I feel like it's such a shallow engagement, and I get it. Listen, you've had a horrible week or a horrible month, and you just want to watch something light, a 40% brain power show, and you just want to sort of switch off and relax and have a laugh at the idiots on the screen. I get that. I totally get that. I have times like that myself. But I don't think that should be your primary consumption. I feel like the 40% brain power shows in literature, that's like having, junk food once a month or once every 2 weeks. But you can't have junk food 3 times a day. I mean, there was literally a documentary about this 20 years ago about a guy who ate McDonald's for, I think, 40 days straight. And very interesting movie to watch, very interesting transformation.
Supersize me.
Supersize me. Fantastic thing. And then after that, McDonald's ended up removing the supersize option from their menus. And then they brought in the large or the extra large. And it's the same damn thing. It was just, anyway, psyop. I think the point from a literature side is you need to consume quality literature that makes you think about things, that makes you ask questions, for the same reason that you need to eat high quality food. If you live on junk food, your body becomes unhealthy. If you consume low quality media or literature, it does the same thing to your intellect. So for me as a writer, yes, I will write my 40% brain power short stories that are action driven, and it's explosions and guns and people chasing mechs and orbital strikes and all the cool stuff that would look cool on a cinema screen. But that shouldn't, for me at least, I don't want that to be my primary production. The things that I want people to remember about me as a writer are the questions I asked, or the questions that I made them ask themselves, where you read the story or you consume the piece of literature, and then afterwards you sit and think about, hey, what would I have done in that situation? Would I have done the same thing? Would I have agreed with this? Would I, that's how we start. Because the moment you start questioning things, that's always when I believe that's when you start learning things about yourself. It's very easy to just accept something. You don't ask a question and you just go on. It's like water off a duck's back. It doesn't change the duck. But when you start questioning things, when you start reasoning for yourself, when you start going through that mental process of, hey, what would I have done? And if this one thing was different, would I have done the same thing? And, that's when you start learning about yourself. And I think if literature can do that to a reader, then you've made a change in someone's life. And that, I think that's, for most of us as writers, that's ultimately the thing that you want to do. You want to change someone's life for the better. Let's put that in as a disclaimer. We don't want to encourage people to do silly or unhealthy things, but you do want to encourage people to think about things and then go out and have a life that's just a little bit different. Like that, that chaos theory, where the butterfly flaps its wings 40,000 years in the past, and then suddenly the timeline is radically different. It's that type of thing. It can be a tiny thing. It can be a tiny change in your life now when you've consumed the literature. But 10 years from now or 20 years from now, it can have had a profound effect on your life. So, yeah, I think that's a noble goal. I don't think we always succeed. I don't always succeed with it. I'll be the first one to say that. But I think it's a good thing to strive for, at least.
The best critique I ever heard of an artist was a reviewer commented after seeing a David Mamet play. And I don't even remember which one it was. Maybe Glengarry Glen Ross might have been it, or even his first big one, American Buffalo. And he wrote, "The play exploded in my head 20 minutes later after he went home and he thought about it," which is the opposite of it turning into mush 30 seconds later when you think about what's for dinner rather than taking anything away. I completely agree with you. I would extend it even further that telling a good story is not mutually contradictory with it being entertaining. And I think writers make this mistake, producers, directors. It's the scourge of Hollywood where you need to get asses in chairs and eyeballs on screen. The money is the driver. And it's not art, it's a product, it's business. And when you run a business, then you do market research and you try to engineer something designed to placate people.
Yeah,
but what often gets lost is the art of storytelling. And even arguably, not to be judgmental, but the dumbest audience still responds well to a well-crafted story. It has a discernible protagonist with clearly delineated goals. It has an adversary providing obstacles in whatever form. And the drama emerges naturally from this conflict between clearly defined goals and obstacles. And they either get what they want or they don't. And if the writers and producers and directors simply let that foundation, that setup, play itself out without voiceover narration, without excessive descriptions and world building, without one character telling the other character what they're thinking and feeling and doing.
Yeah.
You see this over and over again. And it drives me nuts. Christopher Nolan, he writes his movies with his brother. This goes back to his first film, and his brother is a short story writer. Aside from Memento, I truly despise Christopher Nolan. And the reason I do, contrary to so much critical acclaim, is for all the reasons I've just described, which is it's a narration built into a narration built into a narration, which dumbs down the audience and deflates the narrative of organic, emergent, dramatic tension. I think writers, again, make that mistake frequently. The reason I bring it up is you don't need to be profound. You don't need to share a lesson which will be transformative, but you do need to entertain. And in my always humble opinion, the ability to entertain is centered around this capacity for organic, emergent drama that you can emotionally connect with a protagonist. You need not even like the protagonist. But you see yourself in a situation and you become one with it and you're along for the ride and you're amazed, alarmed. You feel all of these autonomous emotions that erupt out of you that aren't a consequence of you convincing yourself that you need to like it because your friends told you it's a good movie or book.
Yeah. I personally quite despise when movies get hyped. So a movie comes out and it's like, oh, it's the best movie ever. You have to go and watch it. It was so fantastic. And then my I suppose just from being contrarian and being difficult by nature, is my first gut response to that is, well, no, now I'm especially going to make a point of not watching it because you've told me that I shouldn't have because it's nice.
I'll be particularly critical of this because
Yeah,
you've
yeah, yeah.
embraced it with no qualification whatsoever.
Yeah. So whenever something gets hyped, I'm always like, because I always ask myself, where is the hype message coming from? If the hype message is coming from, yeah, one needs to be discerning. I'm trying to be very diplomatic now in how I phrase that, but let's just say one needs to be discerning in when we pay attention to the hype or not. Tracking back to your previous point about entertaining, I think you could sort of very coarsely boil it down to the spectrum of, on the one hand, on the one side of the spectrum, you have entertainment value. And on the other side of the spectrum, you have call it the philosophical and moral lesson and preaching. So on the entertainment side of the spectrum, you have, let's say, the MCU movies and the Transformers movies, where it's, pure adrenaline, action, CGI, and it's just entertainment. But 30 minutes after the cinema, your head is empty again. And then on the other side, you could say, literally documentaries, like Nature Channel or History Channel, excluding the Ancient Aliens, which seem to dominate at the moment. But that's sort of the very dry, very dusty, very academic preachiness of the story, where you're not engaging the reader on a journey, but you're telling them what to believe. You're telling them what to think. Like, these are the facts. This is what happens. There's no ambiguity here. There's no other way to interpret it. This is what happened. Point. Full stop.
It's pedagogical.
Yeah,
Whether
it's preachy,
ideological or not, you're teaching people.
Yeah, and that's basically a documentary. That's something you see in school, or, like I said, Nature Channel. So I think for you as a writer, whenever you have a story to tell, I think you must find yourself a place on that spectrum. Like, where am I on that spectrum between entertainment value on the one hand and pure preachiness on the other hand? And then you sort of, need to find a spot there where you feel your story works. I think the mismatch then comes in when authors are, call it, confused or maybe self-deluded about where they sit on the spectrum, because you can have someone write something that's, let's say, 90% preachy and only 10% entertaining, and then yet this author is firmly convinced that it's a highly entertaining story because I've done 450 pages of world building and I have a glossary at the back with 3 new languages and a vocabulary of 8,000 words. It's it's a nice documentary, but it's not entertaining. I'm sorry. Like, great. Wheel of Time, for example, Robert Jordan. Fantastic series. No shade from my side. Okay, a little bit of shade. The middle books, from book 5, 6, 7, when the main characters are literally traveling on horseback over the length and breadth of a continent. Nothing happens. For about 3, 4 books. Nothing of value happens. And it's great from an educational point of view on the spectrum, but from an action and entertainment point of view, it's dry. I read these books about 20 years back, and I struggled to keep going. Once you're through the dip, the action starts picking up again by book, I think 7, 8, 9, starts picking up again, because then all the different moving pieces, because he develops an incredibly wide foundation of characters and settings and plot lines and everything that's moving. And then after about 8 books of sort of building the foundation, he then starts bringing all the plot lines together, and then things start picking up space. The other confusion is also when people write a Transformers movie and then want us to believe that it's profound and educational, and it's like, no, you've had CGI and scantily clad damsels. This is your product. This is what you produce. Don't try and sell this to me as philosophy. Okay, it's eye candy. It's purely entertainment. So I think that level of self-delusion as an author is something that you need to be very, very careful of. And I think that's also where it's very important to have an honest editor and honest proofreaders, people that can read your work and tell you, hey, I like the explosions, I like the guns, I like the mechs, but what the hell is the point of the story? What's the lesson here? Like, it was just an action scene. Like, what are you doing here? I think that type of feedback is then super important. Also, a proofreader that tells you, hey, you've spent 10 chapters telling me what life on Mars is like. When is the shooting going to start? When is the action going to start? That's some of the feedback that I got with Mars Fire. So I had to explain, hey, listen, it's going to pick up. Just bear with me. But it is also, it's valid feedback. I need to take that into consideration when I start, editing the novel once it's done. So I think being aware of that blind spot for yourself as an author is a big thing. Just don't have confidence in yourself on the one hand, but don't believe your own hype. Don't make yourself immune to critical feedback when it's necessary.
Well, you have two poles. You have one pole, which is the MCU fluff, and on the other, you have the documentary pedagogical expose. I think that there's another dimension that you could add to that, which is just proficiency of storytelling, which I believe is what you're getting at, right? So, for example, Ken Burns, the documentary filmmaker, the American, he's done the Civil War, he's done baseball, now he's covered the American Revolution. He spends years researching these documentaries, and then he spends even more years sometimes in the editing room putting it together. And he focuses on individuals enduring and experiencing these epics of history, so he humanizes it. And he has multiple threads of storytelling based on characters who have a goal and encounter obstacles, and then there's a dramatic outcome. Ken Burns is a documentary filmmaker. Various times in history, various countries, largely the United States. And ultimately, though, he's a great storyteller. He exceeds not only in terms of the pedagogy, but his mechanism to educate and empower is good storytelling. Conversely, you could have pure fluff. Pure fluff. For example, the movie When Harry Met Sally was a rom-com that I had saw again just the other week after decades of not seeing it. I think I saw it on television with commercial interruptions.
Way back when.
Continuously. And it's not my cup of tea. Like, the romantic comedy is not at the top of my list. But it was enormously entertaining. It had its own profundity to it in terms of zeroing in on some of the ironies and paradoxes and agonies of love and relationships, young people getting together. But it was thoroughly entertaining from an emotional point of view because the storytelling worked. I didn't walk away with any profound insights about love, but I was thoroughly entertained by it because it told the story well. And I think that's a missing link. So when I judge my own work or critique the works of others, I'm looking at it from a storytelling point of view. Is it entertaining? Is it engaging? Is there a discern, just like you mentioned, that sprawling 9-book saga where the middle part falls out of its own ass because nothing happens? It becomes raw exposition. So is a story infused with a dramatic through line? Okay, so you have a hero who's going from A to Z. Where are you?
What's the tempo?
B, C, D. And sometimes, obviously, it goes tangential and things are happening. It's like a ride in an amusement park. If you don't feel the G-forces in the carriage,
exactly,
then in my estimation, it sucks. It doesn't matter how descriptive it is, and it doesn't matter, whether it's educating me. It doesn't matter if I believe in the values of the author. But if I'm reading and I don't feel pressure, almost a physical pressure, the anxiety of the protagonist on that journey, the resistance, the anxiety that's building to overcome one problem, which leads to a solution, which leads to new problems. If I'm not compelled to turn the pages based on that pressure, I call it literary pressure. storytelling pressure, then I'm like, what's the point?
Yeah. No, I'm 100% in agreement with you there. I think that storytelling, yeah, you call it the literary pressure. I always refer to it as pacing or tempo.
Yeah, tempo is neutral though. It's got a slow tempo. It's got a fun. I'm going for like G forces. You know, I
Yeah,
want
yeah.
to feel. I want to feel pushed into my chair when I'm
Yeah, you want to get into
reading
orbit.
this.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
I 100% agree with you. That pressure is important, but I think it's something that, it's difficult, because I think people, yeah, it's a difficult one to get right. I've read books like that where you start, you buy the book, you get home, you start reading, and then at some point you notice it's 1 o'clock in the morning, and I have work tomorrow. I need to go to bed, but I can't put the book down.
That's
I've
very flattering to that author, right?
right. That's the hook is in then, and you can't get off that hook. Um, but like you said, you need that feeling of you're sort of committed and you're involved with it, and you care about what's happening. It is difficult though. I think especially if you're writing something that does need a bit of a setup. You need to sort of those stories where they need a bit of a broad foundation before it starts moving. I think the trick, what I've always found is with my pacing, and I'm not saying that I'm perfect at this. My book sales would suggest that I'm very much still on the learning curve, but
We could talk about that in a little bit too. I don't think there's a direct relationship between the quality of the content and its sales.
oh, absolutely agree. Yeah,
So
absolutely
I just
agree.
want to qualify that. Don't be self-deprecating based upon your
Yeah,
Amazon
no,
receipts, because that's not fair to you.
no, I know, but I do poke my ego from time to time just to make sure it doesn't get too big. So back to my previous point on pacing with storytelling. What I try to do is don't get, for me personally, don't get bogged down in exposition, because exposition always slows down. It always slows down the tempo. It takes the pressure off, and a lot of the a lot of the writing advice articles that you read or books that you sort of browse through, they all hammer in on that point. If you go into the exposition, if you take the off ramp to exposition town, that's when the journey starts losing speed. So I always try to do my world building in a way where it's not one character lecturing another character, unless the new character, the one character is obviously new in the situation and he needs a bit of an explanation on how to put on his spacesuit, and then we can go outside. So what I did with my Mars Fire novel, for example, is I always explain new things the first time they happen. So the first time they encounter one of the airlocks, you have a quick explanation of how it works. But the second time they go through an airlock, it's a one-line sentence. It's a one-line description. You don't describe it again. The first time they use one of the Martian rovers to travel between the colonies, you have an explanation of the rover, how it looks, how it works. But then that's it. Then the story goes on, and the next time the rover comes up, you just talk about the rover. You don't need to describe it in detail again. You don't need to mention the number of wheels it has, or the tire pressure, or the paint job, or how big it is, or how much, or the reactor. You don't raise that, because it's already been handled. So I think something that people can keep in mind with that type of world building is try to bring your world building in a way that's natural. A bit of advice that I always remember from I've forgotten his name now. The gentleman who wrote the James Bond novels,
Ian
Fleming.
Fleming.
Fleming, yeah. What I always remember, what Fleming always said on the topic of world building, and it was not directly aimed at world building. He sort of obliquely mentioned it, but he said, whenever you refer to an item, refer to it by the brand name. When you describe someone you don't say the character is wearing a watch. You say he's wearing a Rolex model 1975. He's not driving a car. He's driving a Chevy 700. He's not the henchman doesn't have a rifle. He has
He's driving an Austin Martin, right?
or yeah, whatever the case may be. But that's kind of how you drip feed the world building in. And with Bond, it's not really world building. It played off in the real world, between air quotes, at the time. Cold War, 1960s originally. But that's kind of how you can drip feed world building in without taking an entire page or paragraph even to explain exactly what the car looks like. I think the other thing that really, and this is also on the topic of world building and descriptions and relating to the pacing, is if you, it's the Chekhov's gun principle. If you're going to spend an entire page describing the car to me, then that car needs to be very damn important in the story. There needs to be a reason for you to spend 500 words describing this car. Because if the car is not going to feature, then why did you spend a page telling me about the car? My favorite example that really annoyed me to no ends: the very first Daniel Craig Bond movie, Casino Royale. He gets to the place where he's now going to play the final poker match against the bad guy with the bleeding eye, and we see the Aston Martin. The car is in the background. Bond never drives the car up until that moment. And then the first time he gets in the car to now drive the car and have one of the epic Bond chases, he has the car on screen for about 10 seconds, and then suddenly there's a damsel in the road, so he takes the car off-road, and the car goes flipping and rolling and ends up in a ditch, and that's the end of the car. I'm like, listen, just back up for a minute. We're talking about a James Bond movie. We're talking about a very iconic piece of James Bond lore, which is the Aston Martin, with all the gadgets and things that come with it. And you just wrecked this entire car in 10 seconds of screen time. Why was the car here? Did you really need to do this to the Aston Martin?
Can I push back just on your example?
Oh, go for it.
My feeling was they wrecked the car because this is a new James Bond. This is a
Sure.
evolution of the franchise. The Aston
Sure.
Martin was always associated with Sean Connery and all the other guys. And now
Classic
you have
Bond.
Daniel Craig, who is blonde. He's a blonde Bond. He looks completely different style and manner. And we're gonna almost symbolically destroy the old Bond, so you recalibrate to the new Bond. This is a new Bond franchise.
Valid perspective. I won't disagree with that.
There's another challenge with exposition. So Hemingway said famously, never confuse movement with action.
Oh,
So you could feel pressure, but it doesn't have to be driven by a bunch of verbs in quick succession. So there are different types of pressure in a narrative. And the kind of pressure that deflates is what you're describing: redundant or superfluous description that's irrelevant to driving the plot forward. That's one challenge. The converse of that, though, and I'm both a genius at this and a loser, which is tangential descriptions of ideas related to the context of the story. The writer Thomas Pynchon does this, and I might have been both inspired and contaminated by him. I call it the soapbox narrator. You have the characters who are in this organic, emergent, dramatic through line. A to B to C to D, and you're feeling the pressure. Now, when they go from C to D, contextually, there are things going on that the writer wants to blow up in your brain. They set up a little soapbox, with a little microphone, and they give you a little mini TED talk at that point in the narrative. I do this throughout my novel. Some readers are literally WTF. Why did you do it? I don't understand the contextual relationship between this tangential half-page, whole-page experience, and it interferes with the narrative. Can you just shut up and have the characters keep doing what they're doing?
Yeah, sure.
But I'm intoxicated by it, which is there's so much going on that I am going to describe the history of crypto I'm going to talk about the Riemann hypothesis. I am going to talk about Boltzmann brains and spontaneously generating consciousness. I'm going to talk about cellular automata. I'm going to talk about epistemology and philosophy. I'm going to talk about this apocryphal story about Einstein and his chauffeur. Now, a discerning editor would have chopped a third of my book. My book was about 130,000 words.
Yeah.
And I believe an editor would have chopped it into maybe 60, 70,000 concise words, in all fairness.
Okay.
And I'm like, fuck you. Don't touch that.
It's my story. Don't touch the words.
It's my story. Now, this could be for better or for worse. And to me, though, and this is, I think, part of the point, I feel the pressure when my mind is wrapping its head around these tangential flourishes. To me, it adds to that power because I got my brains are joining my heart and my penis in this experience. That's not necessarily the right way to do it, but that's another way to do it. And I'm sure I lose people, and I don't care. I love it.
I think as an author, I absolutely agree with your point. I think as an author, you also need the confidence to say, hey, I'm telling my story. I'm telling it my way for a reason. You could look at Lord of the Rings from Tolkien with exactly the same thing. There are people who read the 10-page description about the trees and they say, what the hell is this doing here? I don't need 10 pages of him describing and naming trees and telling me about the history of the trees.
The trees are called Ents, right? And then you got the tall ones and the fucking short ones, and they got the Ent
different flavors and colors.
All that bullshit. Now, if you're into that, all of a sudden that experience at the edge of the forest with the walking trees is really cool. And if you go even further, it has thematic impact to the characters at that point in the story.
Exactly. And the people who think like Tolkien and enjoy the same things as Tolkien will read the 10 pages about the trees and the Ents and the forests and they will love it, right? Other people will say like, hey, you've just broken the pacing of the story for 10 pages to talk about freaking bark and leaves. It's irrelevant. But again here, the question should be, as a writer, what is your priority? Do you want to sell a story that your editor is going to love because he's catering for the masses? Or are you selling a story that you love and that the people who think like you and who enjoy the same things as you will also love? So I think that's kind of where, as a writer, you need to have the confidence to stand up and say, hey, these 10 pages might not make sense to everyone, but they make sense to me, and they're going to make sense to a bunch of other people, and I'm writing for those people. I'm not writing for everyone else. If they don't care about the trees, skip it. I think, that's where the confidence comes in. Disclaimer on that is confidence turns into arrogance very quickly. It's very easy to have that mindset of, I've put my 10 pages.
How do you know you're slipping? It's captivating to you. Is it captivating to them? And then my own hero, Thomas Pynchon. I think Gravity's Rainbow, no matter how indulgent it is my favorite novel. It's like heroin in the vein. It's like, boom.
Blows the mind.
And he does this a lot in that book. Soapbox, TED Talk. It's going on throughout the book. I love it. Then he put out Against the Day. Same approach. Soapboxes, TED Talks, and it sucked. It was bad.
Message didn't land.
He lost the zip. And it's difficult to describe what that zip is. But Against the Day is equally indulgent as Gravity's Rainbow, but every tangent in Gravity's Rainbow scintillates with brilliance and ties back to the story. And Against the Day was this big, free-flowing mess that was guilty of what you're blaming some of these folks for doing, which is losing that sense of awareness that you're either on point or you're not.
Yeah. And I think it's difficult to know where to draw that line between confidence in your story and in your structure, the way that you deliver information, and then the arrogance that comes with you write something where your proofreaders tell you, hey, this doesn't work, and your editor tells you, hey, this doesn't work, and then you still insist on, hey, I'm going to put this ingredient into the stew pot, and even though it tastes bad, to everyone else, I'm going to enjoy the stew.
Or you're so famous that they're blowing smoke up your ass.
Yeah, that too.
Like you're George Lucas working on the prequels of Star Wars, and the screenplay is shit, and then the dailies are shit, and the CGI looks fake. And George Lucas is paying your salary, and this guy did Star Wars. So I don't want to get fired. And what do I know? I'm going to argue with George Lucas that his new movie sucks.
Yeah,
that's a tough spot to be in, right?
It's dangerous. And that's also something, as call myself an amateur student of history, you see that in politics as well. You get a leader who has some brilliant ideas, so they come to power. And then when they start having bad ideas, they're surrounded by, idiots who just always say yes, and they never disagree, and they never point out reality or the flaws. And I think as a creative, as an artist, I think we all dream of having a supporting and a supportive fan base. But exactly this, you can then end up with people who support you even when you're walking over the edge of the cliff. And that's, I don't know how you stay honest in that situation. I'm actually, as I'm saying this now, I'm reminded of the old Roman custom. Whenever a conquering general returned to Rome, and this is a story, I don't know how true it is, but the story goes that whenever the general came back, he would be riding in his chariot, and the legions would be marching through all of the triumphal arcs. Beautiful procession, everyone's cheering, everyone's happy because, the Senate is throwing out money and bread. But the general, in his chariot, he would have his driver managing the show, and then he would have a little a dwarf in the chariot with him. And the dwarf would stand there and tell him everything that he's done wrong, everything where he's failed, everything that he's messed up completely. And the idea was the dwarf would be the literal reality check, saying, hey, everyone loves you right now, but remember that time you messed up? Remember that time you forgot to burn a bridge and the enemy counterattacked and wiped out your baggage train? Remember that time that you didn't take the port in time and the enemy kingdom or the kings managed to flee out and continue the resistance? That's sort of your reality check. So I think it's important to have someone as a writer close to you that can still be brutally honest with you when needs be. Not cruel. I think the dwarves were a bit cruel. But have someone with you that can just be honest, someone who can read your work, who can appreciate it at sort of the same or close to the same level as you. But that person needs to be honest with you then and say, hey, I know everyone else is putting smoke up your ass. I'm going to put a stick up your ass. This is not working. You need to wake up.
They need to understand where you're coming from, and they need to understand your intent. Because a lot of this disconnect comes from just misalignment between creator and consumer. Different strokes for different folks. There's as many different kinds of writers as there are writers, and same goes for the readers. One person's genius is another person's moron. And sometimes genius comes across as stupidity to people incapable of understanding it. And other times it's not genius at all. It's drivel. So is there an absolute? I mean, this goes back again to the Greeks. Immanuel Kant tried to tackle this with the synthetic a priori. How can we possibly bring this notion of absolute truth to reality? 1 + 1 is analytical. It's always true. If we live in a multiverse, 1 + 1 is universally true. But a green book isn't. That's not an analytical statement. That's a synthetic one. You can have a green book or you can have a blue book. And if you have a green book that doesn't contradict the blue book, it just is a synthetic green book. So Kant's critique of pure reason was, is the synthetic a priori possible? Can I have the same certainty, logical certainty, that the book is green that I can that 1 + 1 is 2? And he didn't quite pull it off. And the reason I bring that up is is there an absolute gauge of art?
Yeah.
Now, the Hungarian guy just won the Nobel Prize. I forget his name. He's not Kertész. He's something. I'm Hungarian, so I have like
Oh,
this
you.
affinity. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think his shit is drivel, honestly. He might have written some decent stuff maybe a few decades ago, but
Mm,
now
mm.
he's writing a 1,000-page novel, which is one sentence, one long sentence.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, he
Really?
said that. Yes, he is. He won the Nobel Prize for Literature. And I think, no offense, he's got his head up his ass. And
That,
apparently
yeah.
the Nobel
Well,
Committee doesn't think so. They put him up there. Who am I to say? Like, what kind of standards are we using? And green book, blue book, synthetic a priori, 1+1 is 2. It's hard to say.
I think in this case with the Nobel committee, I'm reminded of the fable of the king with no clothes. I'm not saying it's exactly the case, but I'm reminded of that fable just for
Well, that's
some
a
reason.
perfect allegory. The quality of content and its accessibility and success in the market.
Mm. Yeah.
It's enough to make you crazy as a writer, because we're always being judged, and
Yeah.
people are coming at us from all points of view,
Mm,
and
mm.
we need to stay true to ourselves, our own voice, and feel
Ultimately.
the spark. And
Yeah.
you brought up a great point just a couple minutes ago, is that you feel it inside. You feel that you are writing for yourself, and in your heart of hearts that it's good, and that a certain audience will
Mm,
think it's good
mm,
too. You're not just writing for yourself, but you're basing it on a paradigm and a style.
mm,
And you might
mm,
have amalgamated a few genres, and you're doing your own spin on it.
mm, mm.
But that it's good, and that there are people out there who would agree with you.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
problem is, from a writer's point of view, in the saturated environment that we live in now, is finding that connection. How do you
Yeah.
find the readers who would love your stuff, instead of randomly throwing it out there, or paying some enshittified algorithm to put
Yeah.
your content
Oh,
in front of a consumer that they think they might like.
yeah.
AI is getting better at it, and I'm hoping that a silver lining of this AI revolution is improving this capability of understanding content and creator, and
Mm,
bridging that
mm.
gap. I think that's where we're headed. I would hope so. And I would pay money to get my stuff in front of sympathetic audiences.
Yeah. I think historically that's sort of where your traditional publishing houses used to sit. In terms of certain houses would take on certain publishing houses would take on certain authors and then connect them with a certain market segment, and then you would have success. If you take the wrong author and you take the wrong work and put it in front of the wrong audience, it will belly flop completely. You put, I don't know, the Twilight vampire books in front of a hard sci-fi audience, it's going to fail. You put hard sci-fi in front of the Twilight audience, it's going to fail. So yeah, I'm also keeping fingers crossed that things improve in the future. If it will, we'll see. I think just circling back to an earlier point that we made about, you write something and, the 10 pages about the trees, and you write it for yourself because that's a story that you want, but you also know that there are people out there who will like it. I think something to recognize as a writer, or is in a more broader term as an artist, is your support base or your audience base is not a static, monolithic, homogeneous entity. Your supporters will change over time as your work changes. The people who like your work in the first 5 years will not like the stuff that you produce after that, but the stuff that you produce from year 6 to 9 might draw a completely new type of support base. Simple example that I remember from when I was still in school, I was a big fan of the metal band Metallica. Watch all the documentaries about Metallica, first albums in the 80s. And it was very interesting in Metallica's history. There was a very interesting thing that happened. They did metal music. So they did singles and LPs and tapes back then, and then eventually CDs. And then at one point in time, they made their first music video, which went on MTV, and a lot of people saw it. And at that point in time, they literally lost fans who accused them of selling out, between air quotes, for making music videos, now catering to the mainstream nonsense. So they lost a chunk of their supporters because they made a music video. Oh, how dare you? What heresy is this in the metal community? But because they made the music video, they were seen by a significantly a significantly larger new audience. And then they got a new bunch of supporters from that side of things. So I think as a writer, you must always recognize that, yes, if you write something that potentially or actually loses you supporters from the one camp, that does not mean that it's not going to get you supporters somewhere else. If you normally write hard sci-fi, hard men doing scientific things, blah, 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 and that has a certain support base, and then you write your fourth or your fifth novel, and suddenly there's a romantic arc in the story as well. Now the hard sci-fi guys tune out. They're like, oh no, this is disgusting, there's hormones involved. But now a new segment of the audience suddenly opens up and says, hey, now this is more relatable. There's a romance element. The personal side of the character is more developed. This is the type of thing I can connect with. And now you get supporters on that side. So, yeah, it's like it's waves on an ocean. It changes. It's constantly going up and down. And I don't think you should look at that monolithic supporter and say, they're all like this. And if I do something that chips the monolith, then, it's bad, and I must not do that. And I must just keep producing the same formula over and over again. Using the metal music example as well now, Metallica was sort of entered the scene at the same time as Megadeth. And it was very interesting because Metallica's music very much evolved over time up until they did the Load and Reload albums. And then a lot of people got very annoyed because their sound, their feeling was completely different by the time they did that. And then they did the St. Anger album in the beginning of the early 2000s, very different sound again. But over the years, as the band matured, call it that, circling back to our very first point, as the band sort of changed, their sound also changed. And then if you compare them to Megadeth is still making the same music today that they did in 1980. It's exactly the same music.
Megadeth is Dave Mustaine, who was a guitar player in Metallica, who got drunk a few too many times, got into a few too many fights, and got fired.
Yes.
So he got fired early in Metallica's evolution. And to your point, Dave Mustaine is just Dave Mustaine. He liked that shit, and then he's been competing with Metallica since. But stylistically, I don't think he has that broad range that Metallica embodied.
Exactly. So if you say Metallica is now the one example versus Megadeth, Megadeth has produced the same sound and content for 50 years now. And so the support base has been, I want to say, the same type of people, the same type of metal enjoyers. Metallica, their sound has changed over time. So some of the people who supported them in the 80s maybe don't listen to the new stuff, but there are people who listen to the new stuff who cannot stomach the old stuff as well. So the support base is constantly changing. So I think as an artist, that's a reality that you need to be aware of, and don't get stuck on this idea that I have to cater to a certain community, and the only way to do that is to write a very narrow, have a very narrow scope of what your artistic output
flexible. Is. That's great advice. I was on Catalina Island a few months ago. Mm-hmm. It is a large island off the coast of Southern California. Okay. And it's owned by a family. An American family owns the entire damn island. It's the Wrigley family.
Okay.
And they make the chewing gum.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And Wrigley started as laundry soap.
Okay.
So it was a box of soap, powdered soap. And they had trouble differentiating because there are a bunch of people selling soap in a box. So they put chewing gum into the soap. as a kid. So you dig through you pour the powder, and then inside is a little prize, is the chewing gum.
Yeah.
And then the chewing gum became more popular than the
And then the
than
soap.
soap. And then they made their hundreds of millions and billions on the chewing gum. So the point here is it's kind of a silly story, but it exemplifies what you're saying, which is stay flexible, stay alert. You never know when you get your opportunity, and you don't need to betray your core values, your core stuff. Just be adaptive. Like, look at Darwinian evolution. It's like mutations are happening all the time internally, and your environment is changing around you constantly. So that combination of random mutation with external environmental variation is the engine of evolution. So if you look at it analogously as a writer, internally, your mutations are new ideas, new creativity. You're always tweaking and changing and firing it up. You don't have the same point of view. You might have the same style or stylistic stuff, but you're mutating, you're varying.
Yeah.
And if you take a look at what's out there and embrace opportunity that comes your way, you have an opportunity to connect with people. You have an opportunity to connect with platforms. You have an opportunity to connect, to branch out. And that could do wonders for your writing and your career as a writer. I think that that's very, very significant. In the Fazuli book, I have a character who is an alien cat-like being.
Okay.
And she is the personal bodyguard, lover, and head of the security detail of a senior ranking agency managing director. So she's hooked up with the power. That's her thing. She becomes the love interest of this Johnny Fazuli guy in the sequel. And I have these premonitional dream sequences because I have a bunch of later stuff written and I'm impatient. And I also wanted to tease the audience. I couldn't wait to get the kitty cat in there. So I got the kitty cat in there. So recently I've been talking to, and I had as guests on my podcasts, folks who are involved with Canon Publishing, and they do military sci-fi. So I was in a science fiction anthology where I met Al Hagen. He's a writer of military sci-fi. He had a short story. I had a short story in this collected anthology. So I had him on the podcast. Come on the podcast. We'll talk about your work. He's with the publisher. He connected me with another guy, Mike Morton. And then he connected me with the guy who runs it, J.F. Holmes. They're all writers. They all do military sci-fi. So just to bring your point to life, I have a spin-off character here. I have the Better Call Saul of Breaking Bad, only in reverse, which is I'm working on my Fazuli sequel. But what if I brought the kitty cat's backstory to life? She is a martial artist, killer kitty.
Yeah.
Military sci-fi. So I'm going to pitch that as a whole new style to these guys. The only reason I bring this up is it's like writers. If you're a writer and you're listening to two writers chatting here, we're talking about themes and best practices and all that. James here brought up the most important aspect, I think, of being a good writer, which is staying flexible, adaptive, and embracing opportunity.
Yeah.
So I'm going to pitch these guys. Mercenary Minx is going to be my...
Well, that's your selling line right there. The Mercenary Minx. Yeah, it works.
She's hot. So that long diatribe was just to reinforce what you said from a personal point of view, which is I have my own style, my own big book. But if I have an opportunity to adapt myself and cater to different audiences and connect myself with different communities of writers, why not do that? Why not go for it?
Yeah, if you have a story that fits that call it the paradigm or the audience that you're catering it for, do it. I mean, you're writing the story, like we said earlier, for yourself, but also for the people who share the same interests and sort of have the same reading habits. Make it happen. I think circling back to your point about Wrigley's, you start with soap, you end up with chewing gum as your main thing. I think my takeaway from that is if you focus on a high quality product and high quality service, then it doesn't matter what the product or the service is. If it's high quality, it will succeed. Probably. There's some exceptions to that, but most of the time, if the product is high quality and if the service is high quality, it will succeed. So if your focus is on the high quality, you will succeed whatever it is. If your focus, if Wrigley had instead said, hey, listen, we are super passionate about soap and we only want to do soap, and soap is the one thing that keeps us going from sunrise to sunset. If they had focused on the soap, they would probably have gone in a very different trajectory from the one that they took in this reality. Maybe there's an alternate reality where Wrigley's took over the world with soap, or they faded into obscurity after 5 years. We don't know. But I think as a writer, you must, and as any artist, you must have that thing like, listen, is my focus on the high quality product and service, or is it on a specific topic and I only push that topic? And then if no one is buying soap anymore, then yeah, sorry, I guess I'm out of business as well.
There's a company called Allbirds, I think, and they make shoes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm not joking with this. They make shoes with like wool inside them, and I always thought they were fashionista bullshit,
Yeah.
And they were the darling of the Silicon Valley, Cupertino, Apple, Mountain View, Google,
Yeah.
that whole tech crowd.
The
And
tech barons.
they started from nothing and they went to $4 billion, and then they tanked because fashion changes with the winds.
Yeah.
And somebody farts and you go from a billionaire to bankrupt. Now they're worth $40 million, 1%. So they had the great idea, and I think it has to do with the relationships that they have within the tech community. Now they are like AI birds or new AI bird or some bullshit like that. They're actually distributing GPUs for data centers.
Right.
What the actual fuck? I mean, you go from a shoe company to a GPU company. Now, that's kind of bullshit, but to your point, they're looking at the end user, and they have lots of connections in Silicon Valley because of their pedigree. So it's a double-edged sword, right? You can fake it till you make it. You got to be careful about going too far off brand. But I like what you said, though, about staying focused on the consumer, because the Wrigley family was, ultimately we're selling product and we want to create a customer experience. And our customers are experiencing the chewing gum more and better than our soap. So, maybe more readers will enjoy the mercenary minx than the ADHD loser, right? There you go.
Hey, history is full of sort of accidental side characters who then become spotlight characters on their own.
Yeah, who knows? So just have fun, stay flexible, and try to connect with the community. You brought up the frustrations that we all have I liken it to Dostoevsky in the basement. You got your big stack of papers, and we're isolated, and we're writers. But But in order to be read, you need to create touch points with the world. You need to get your ass out there one way or another. How are you trying to do it? Is it important for you to make that connection? You're on Substack, but Substack is kind of a circle jerk of writers for the most part, right? I mean,
I'm laughing, but I'm not disagreeing.
I mean, most of my friends on Substack, including you, are other writers. Which you get that fist pump, and I get podcasts out of it. And this is a delightful conversation. And we might get some readers who will buy our books watching this, which is partly of what we hope for. But it's mostly an insular, claustrophobic kind of intellectually incestuous community of people working together toward a common end. How do you market outside of this?
So just before Substack for me is an interesting setup, because I think a year or two ago, or maybe 2-3 years ago, Substack used to be a place where you had small amount of writers and then a large amount of readers, consumers. The platform has changed, unfortunately. We've all seen the changes rolling out the last, I want to say 12 to 18 months, new features being added, interface redesigns, things have just, it feels like the rug's being pulled out of your feet every 2 or 3 weeks.
It's being enshittified. The enshittification of social media.
We're making it's Facebook 2.0. That's how I think of it. It's Facebook 2.0. I'm just waiting for them to start adding photo galleries, because then it's properly Facebook 2.0.
Yeah.
But so I think Substack used to be a place where you could either go as a writer and find readers, or you could go as a reader and find writers. I think it used to be that place. Nowadays, not so much. And Substack for me, also, like you said, the bit of the circle jerk there. It's a bit like these universities where you have these academic departments where you have the humanities are especially vulnerable to it, where you have people in their high ivory towers and everyone is very smart and everyone is a doctor in this and a PhD in that. And we're all congratulating each other on how clever our theories are. Yes, that. Yeah.
I'm making the snooty nose gesture.
Yeah. Breathing the rarefied air of our high intellects.
Then, smelling each other's farts and thinking it's ambrosia.
That. And then you sit in your ivory tower and you come up with this beautiful theory of something like communism. And then when people apply it in reality and it doesn't work, then you're oh so surprised. And oh, hey, guys, if we just try it one more time, I'm sure we'll get it right next time. Substack can give that impression as well. You have people who are very eager to boost each other. And then it's a case of it's more, butt rubbing than it is honest feedback.
It's quid pro quo nonsense. I need to grow my followers and subscribers. So right now I'm invisible to everyone. Hey, Substack, if you've got under 500 subscribers, I want to read your stuff. Get out of here. Like, you're really curious. You're dying to read other people's stuff. No, you just want people to back you up. And then the other one is subscribing and liking other people just so they subscribe and like you. That's endemic on almost all these writer platforms. Like on Medium. On Medium, you have the same bullshit. Which is, I get people liking my stuff in tsunamis. I get Romano douchebag the third, okay? And he just started writing on Medium, and all of a sudden he likes 23 of my posts going back to 2019.
It's like, you read all of that in 5 minutes?
I'm so flattered.
Yeah, I think that tying that into your original question here about promoting yourself is, I think as a Substack creator, or as any type of creator on any type of social media platform, you have to realize that the metrics are just numbers. They're pixels on a screen. They do not mean anything. The only thing on Substack that actually matters are paid subscribers. And you need a great many of those to start paying bills, or to start paying more than a dinner at a restaurant once a month, for example. I think that's something very...
Starbucks.
Yeah, a Starbucks. Yeah, I have one paid subscriber, so I'm fully aware of
and that's your mom.
I don't know. It's like I appreciate the support. The subscriber is called Ray. Ray, if you're listening to this, I really love you, man. Thank you.
Yeah. You should call out Ray when you're gonna restack my podcast.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I hope. I've featured people on my podcast, and I've even done videos with them. Mm-hmm. I've spent hours on their shit, and they don't even restack me.
Oh, come on.
Come on, guys.
For shame.
Shame on you.
So yeah, shout out to Ray.
And there was Ray from Mookie. All right, represent.
Yeah. And there was one other gentleman. He actually had a very interesting support plan. He has a sort of a rotating subscription where he subscribes to one person for 3 or 4 months, and then he ends it, and then he subscribes to someone else for 3 or 4 months.
That's really nice. Sort of
spreading the love. Really support that. Yeah. I must confess now, I'm blanking on the name, but I will tag him when. So shout out to the rotating subscriber. So anyway, I think the point is on Substack, it's pixels. The subscriber count is pixels. What matters is money in your bank account, and that comes from the paid subscribers. Those are rare. I find it especially obvious when you look at these massive accounts that pop up. Someone with 7,000 or 50,000 subscribers, they post a note or article, gets 5 reactions. That already tells you that subscriber count is not a measure of engagement. It's not. There's no causal or even vaguely remote correlation between the two, in my mind at least, because the evidence does not support it. I think marketing-wise, the challenge that we're all facing is, I want to say people my generation, maybe a bit older, maybe a bit younger, we all grew up on rubbish like Facebook and Instagram and stuff like that. And I'm at a point in my life now where I hate social media. I'm on record saying this. I hate social media, and Substack is a form of social media. I hate it. It's fake. It's not real. It's performative. We all use fake names and fake profile pics, says the guy with a fake profile pic. But it's not real. And for me, the idea of now as a writer, I've put my heart and my soul into my writing. I've produced something that I love, and I know other people will also love it if they can find it on the internet. The idea for me to now spend an hour or two every day doing social media presence, or, oh, you need to market yourself, you need to sell your product, it drives me up the wall. I don't like doing it. I have a Tumblr account where I post some of my short stories. I haven't touched it in, I think, 4 or 5 months, so oversight on my side.
Wow, Tumblr.
Tumblr, yeah, that gives you an indication of how old I am.
Still there?
Yeah,
Wow.
So Tumblr actually has a very large fan fiction community where they read people who read and write fan fiction from established communities or universes, call it that. I think the biggest one is AO3, Archive of Our Own, I think is the one tag. My wife actually told me about that because she reads.
I remember Tumblr from like 10 years ago. It was pretty big, 15 years ago. Then it had some issues. Like there was a Tumblr boycott, Tumblr revolt. When I think they tried to sell the data, and then there was a rebellion at one point.
Yeah. There was Tumblr also went through a thing where they started banning basically adult content, which was apparently a big segment of Tumblr.
Some cancellations that was going on there too.
But for me, in my head, Tumblr is still very much a visual media thing. It's a bit like Pinterest, but with more text. It's an image and then some text behind it. That's kind of how I think of Tumblr in my head. But apparently there is a very active fan fiction community on there. So I'm sort of trying to get my fingers into that. But the problem that I think we're fighting with, and this is for every artist out there, whether it's written media, visual media, anything like that, is we are fighting against the AI tsunami, the slop tsunami. And a point to support that is, it was a very interesting article that I noticed on Substack here actually recently. I say recently, maybe a month or two back, where someone pointed out that Amazon, where most of us publish our work for print on demand, Amazon has recently changed their terms and conditions for the print on demand services so that a single author is now capped at a maximum of 3 books per day. Now, just let that number sink in for a moment. Just ponder those numbers for a moment. It is not humanly possible, unless you write, maybe if you're writing like a 5-page coloring in book or something, it is not humanly possible for a human, Homo sapiens, alive, organic person to produce 3 books in a single day. Okay.
Spock could do it from Star Trek.
Yeah. But it'll be coloring books with maybe 15 pages per book. But the point is if you, as a massively prolific author who not only writes but let's say produces 5,000 to 6,000 words every single day, nonstop, no exceptions, if you can produce a book in 3 months, you have one title in 3 months, so that's 91 days on Amazon. Over the same 91 days, an AI author will produce 273 titles. Those are your odds that you're playing against. 1 against 273. And that's now with the new rules. Before this, authors could produce more than that. I say authors between air quotes, but it's now capped. So over a 3-month period, you competing against one AI author is 1 to 273. Now, there are X amount of human authors, and then there are multiples of X amounts of AI authors. So if you want to get seen on Amazon, you cannot rely purely on the quality of your writing. And this circles way back to my original sort of ego stabbing point about, my writing being what it is, but I don't really have the sales number. Like, I have confidence in the quality of my writing, but I don't really have the sales numbers to back it up. That's the problem that we're facing on Amazon, is you are competing with a tsunami of slop from tens, if not hundreds of thousands of bot accounts that churn out garbage. They sell 1 or 2 copies, but because the barrier to entry is zero, there's no fee to list anything on Amazon. You can upload anything you want 3 times a day, apparently. We get drowned out. So you need a marketing element or a viral moment to be seen and noticed. If you don't have that, you drown. You're under that tsunami immediately. I don't know what the magic solution is to this. I honestly don't. If there was one, I would sell a liver and 3 toes to get it. But right now, you produce fantastic work, or even just adequate work, you put it on Amazon, and you're immediately flooded. You're immediately, within hours, you're 500 points down the line, and then 1,000, and then it's just, you're gone.
Well, you need to pay. You need to pay.
Pay for advertising, yeah, but then you spend more on advertising than you make from your book sales. And even when you pay,
well, it depends.
I suppose,
there's a marketing company called Written Word, writtenword.com, I think. And they did a survey of indie authors, and I did a whole podcast on this. And this was referred by writers on Substack, Daniel P. Douglas. They're the twins on Substack. I love those guys. And the numbers and the results are eye-popping. They break down indie authors in terms of monthly income. Those indie authors making $10,000 off their books per month, okay? They're making 120 grand a year US. Now, here's some of their characteristics on average. They have at least 60 books that are published, 60.
Yeah.
They spend at least $5,000 of that $10,000 on paid advertising. So they spend $5,000 a month, and they get $10,000 in book sales. So they're really making $5,000 a month. Effectively. But you need to pay to play is the thing.
Yeah.
And I had another writer on the podcast here, Lou Iovino. And he does, the show and book Expanse, where we have humans in the solar system. He's got some asteroid-style stuff. And it's higher quality stuff. He's a good writer. His boss now is my boss in the agency world, the New York Madison Avenue agency stuff. So that's how we know each other. My former boss said, "Hey, Mookie, you're writing science fiction. Go talk to Lou. He's an art director. You're a strategist." So I got him on the podcast.
Yeah.
He's had some success as a novelist. He has a trilogy, and he's got like 150, 280 reviews. Now, if you have that much on Amazon, multiply by 20 for actual sales. Not bad. Maybe even more than that. And I talked to him on the podcast, and he spends money. He puts Facebook ads, and it's a similar kind of ratio. He said, I'll spend 100, 200, 300 bucks, and then I'll get like 200, 300 bucks in sales. And then he feeds the enshittified platform. And he feels even if he's net zero or hardly any, like he pays back into the machine, he's at least getting his books out there, and he's getting reviews, and he's building his reputation. And now he's trying to option his content. He has an agent. He's gotten an agent, even though he went indie. And this agent is trying to get him into, the usual, like movies and other stuff and whatever. Or maybe even a legit publishing deal with a sci-fi publisher.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
he's playing the game. Now,
Yeah.
according to this survey, according to Lou, like people I know, it's a pay to play kind of environment. You need to run it like a business. Now, the other
Yeah.
alternative is what I've been doing, and I'm doing it just because of the quirkiness of my personality. 3 to 5 1 to 2 minute videos per day on TikTok.
Okay.
I get an idea in my bald head and I grab my phone and I do a selfie video. And I bang out 2, 3, 4, 5 of these every day. And it takes me all told about an hour, sometimes less. Because I do it in one take. I don't even caption them anymore. I used to caption them. It doesn't make any difference. And then I go TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. I put them here on Substack as notes. If you
I've
look
seen
at
some of them on Substack. Yeah.
yeah. And then I put them on Patreon too. And if there's any business relationship, I put them on LinkedIn too. I annoy people on LinkedIn. So I'm blasting that. My Johnny Fazuli book is written in 3-line sentences. So I'm tweeting it in reverse on X. The whole book I'm tweeting backwards at Johnny Fazuli.
Okay.
And then I'm barfing out content on Medium, on Substack. And I have 5 podcast shows. I almost forgot. Like, here we are on a podcast show. And part of my rationale for starting a podcast, I can't shut the hell up, and I love talking to people exactly like you. I'm having a great time. We burned through 2 hours, and it's been like 5.
Yeah, it's really been.
I love bullshitting like this. It's great. All I need to do is hit record, and we're off to the races.
Yeah,
and then I just post. I edit a little bit. I post it, and then I blast the podcast on Substack, on Facebook, wherever. So my antidote to this pay to play and shitification of platforms is to spew.
Yeah.
Now, has it been effective? Well, financially, not that much, but it's been a lot of fun. And here's the important point, though. I am building community. Like you and I would have just been text fields in Substack. And I feel like I've really gotten to know you in the last 2 hours, and it's been wonderful. Wonderful. And I've learned a lot. You've educated me, and you've given me a very interesting perspective. So I love it for that. And I got content. I networked with another author. And I'm building community with podcasts because I was tired of being hidden behind my words and these shitty posts on social media. I'm trying to reach out to actual people.
Yeah, make a real connection. That is one of the selling points, or call it one of the strong points maybe, of Substack that I keep hearing about. People talking about, Substack is a great way to make real connections with other writers, yes, but also with your fans and with the community. But yeah, it does. What you've explained now, it does reinforce the point that you have to put the time in to make the marketing angle. You have to play it, even if you don't like it. Like in my particular case, okay, let me disclaimer there. I don't dislike our conversation. The conversation has been fantastic here. We've had some great things to discuss here. But the constantly, 6 or 7 different websites, and you have to post notes 3 or 4 times a day to stay visible, be seen. So
I only do it because I enjoy it. Yeah. If I wouldn't enjoy it, I wouldn't do it. I save my taxes for the very last second, and then my finances are like a disaster because I'm talking about quantum physics in my fucking novel, and I can't balance my checks. So it's priorities, and it's also interest. So I enjoy doing all this. It's very satisfying. But I also recognize that many people do not.
Yeah, I'm one of those.
And it's a chore. So then it begs the question of how do you get your stuff out there, right?
Yeah.
And there's this there's almost this Pollyanna idea. It's naive but endearing that if I just write my stuff, something amazing is going to happen. Almost every writer, if you really are honest, they all believe this.
Yeah, it's the dream.
When I talk to writers too, they say this. They end it, go, oh, it's very difficult out there. I'm not quite sure if anyone's really paying attention. It's very lonely sometimes. And they always say this. But you never know.
Yeah.
You never know. You could have that Netflix content
Yeah. Yeah.
hunter just, trolling on Substack and sees my short story about 18-dimensional aliens and is like, "Oh my God, that's it."
Yeah. But I think that dream is what keeps people afloat in that ocean of call it despair and AI fueled
AI,
challenges that we're dealing.
slop burn and this very introverted revulsion to knocking on doors and
Mm,
peddling your
mm.
stuff. You're like, I worked hard on this short story, on this novel. And now you want me to what? Be
Sell it.
a used car salesman and try to convince people that they should like what I know is genius? That is so
Yeah.
insulting to me. And the
Yeah.
time I would be spending writing my next book, what? You want me to go,
Mm.
send emails to people I don't even know?
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's exactly that. And it's the reality, unfortunately. And as much as you, in my case particularly, as much as you want to kick against it, it is the reality. And I think the sooner you wake up and start embracing, like, hey, I have to do the legwork, I have to do the socializing, the networking, I have to do it, even if you're not particularly fond of it, even if you don't like, the performative note performance, noting on Substack. I see some of these people post things, and I think to myself, like, do you really mean this, or is this really just a quota?
Let me answer that question for you. They did not. I'm like, I see
Yeah,
that stuff too. Fuck out of here with this.
yeah,
I understand why you're doing it, and I'm
yeah, yeah.
completely on your side. You got to do it. But
Mm,
did you really, really want to read the
yeah, yeah.
first
It's like,
chapters of 10 of your Substack writers and give them feedback? Is that
mm,
how you wanted to spend your Friday afternoon?
yeah.
And
It's
the
also
answer is yes, I did. If I could get 10 new subscribers.
because and this again, this circles back to one of my very first points when we started talking, like you said, 2 hours 15 minutes ago.
Yeah.
Um, an adult is someone who understands that when you want something, you have to pay the price. And I think for us as a writer, there has to come that moment when you realize, if I want this thing, I have to pay the price. And in this case, paying the price means you have to do the networking. You have to put the time in. You have to be on 5 or 6 or 8 or 9 or 15 different social media sites. You have to do it. If you want the prize, you have to pay the price. That's it. That's where it comes in.
I think so, unless you're just content writing and writing your stuff, and you could see what happens.
Yeah,
but,
wait
but
for the white whale to arrive. Yeah.
and in ways, I'm like damned and I'm lucky at the same time. I think, me personally, because I'm
Mm.
like my character Johnny Fazuli. So he does extreme sporting events. In one of the early chapters of the book, to impress his Gen Z female counterpart, he wingsuit base jumps off of his balcony in downtown
Right.
Chicago, and he GoPros it, and he
Right.
puts it
Right.
on YouTube, like live YouTube and live Facebook. He
Yeah. Yeah.
GoPros while he spirals down the building, and then he lands in the street with his parachute, and then he goes into the Starbucks right when his coffee's ready. That's his thing. But my equivalent of doing that is ranting like a maniac in my kitchen about politics. I have
Yeah.
that I have that exhibitionist quality. I don't
Mm,
do
mm.
extreme sports, but I enjoy sharing my ideas and just
Yeah.
barfing stuff out there.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think the key is to tap into what you like. There are
Mm,
aspects of marketing that suck, but there might be
definitely.
aspects that you might like.
Yeah. I think I think if I can borrow from the human resources textbook, is they say always, like, identify the things that give you energy, and then find out what that horse is, and then ride that horse, if you want to go somewhere. Um, but yeah, it's also the previous point, talking about, if you want the prize, you have to pay the price. I think if the thing that you want to achieve is fame and money and stuff, all the flashy, the Hollywood deals and titles and stuff, then the price that you have to pay is you have to do the networking. But if the prize that you're chasing is, hey, I just want to have my stuff out there, and I have 3.5 diligent readers who like all my stuff, and I'm happy to cater for them, then that's it. That's your prize, because I think everyone has their own idea of what success looks like. But I think whatever your idea of success is, understand what it is, and understand what the steps are to get there.
I think that's right. And it's also fair and could be fun.
Yeah.
As I'm mentioning, I find what I'm doing is intrinsically rewarding, even if the monetization is low to no. And even if it doesn't have a direct bearing on my reach and engagement for my
Yeah.
publishing.
Yeah.
I honestly don't give a shit, because that hour where I record and spew is very rewarding to me.
Yeah.
It's enjoyable. Doing these podcasts is rewarding and enjoyable to me.
Yeah.
I don't need anything else aside from this experience. And then, editing out when we talk over each other, I get a little transcript. So after we finish, it's going to take me, like, this is 2.5 hour long. I can rip through the thing. It'll take me like 20 minutes to edit. It'll take me another 10, 15 to pop it up on Buzzsprout. This is audio only, so you save me some time on YouTube. And then we have another podcast. And then I throw it out there.
Yeah.
If 1 million people see it, or 5, 98% of the joy came from the actual doing.
Yeah. And if that's what your source of energy is, then that's fantastic, because because the way it's like a battery that you're charging. You do something to charge the battery up with energy, and then you plug the battery into a system, and then you use the energy for something. So do something that energizes you, and then use that energy to do the stuff that requires energy, I suppose. Yeah.
While we're talking about that energy, why writing? I ask writers this, and it sometimes feels like it comes from left field. And the counterexample I usually do is the return on investment, as we're saying, is very low to sometimes non-existent in financial terms. And what I usually ask is, why aren't you selling crypto instead? If you want to maximize your hours and the payout, why write? Have you been writing your whole life? Did you start later in life? Where does this come from? Because I've seen a lot of your stuff, and you have, again, a broad palette. You have a lot of content on Substack, more than most, and you've been cranking what looks like couple years, right, on Substack. And you've got different worlds already building, and you have the serialized novel. Where does all this energy come from?
Yeah, I think the writing is something that, for as far back as I can remember, I've always enjoyed writing. I've enjoyed making my own stories, in a sense. And I grew up in an environment where it was sort of I suppose the neutral way to describe it was a very strict religious background. And in our house, there was no television. It was something that just wasn't a part of the household. And as kids, the way that we kept ourselves busy, and the way that we entertained ourselves, and the way that we passed the hours, was with reading. So when we were still very young, my father would read us bedtime stories at night. So he would have a big book of fairy tales and fables and things like that. So he would read us stories before we go to bed. And then the moment that we could read, so as kids, sort of pre-reading age, we had that love of reading, and stories was sort of built into us. And then the moment that I could read myself, I started reading, because now it was a case of, you could go on epic adventures, and you can explore new worlds and new countries and see things and meet people, and you're still in your bedroom, reading. So for me, that was always it was a fantastic way to sort of experience things, even when you're not, between air quotes, really experiencing them. And then as I got a little bit older, I started realizing that there are things that I want to read that no one has written yet, which then plugs into that line of, write the stories that you want to read, or the stories that you wish you could have read 10 years ago or 20 years ago, the stories that would have had an impact on your life. So that's when I then started writing. Um, it was kind of funny though. It was a bit of it was writing and I don't know, just a general sense of creativity, because I remember as a kid, I was still very young. I think I was about 13 years old. There was this very old, very primitive computer game that I was playing. It was from the Ultima series. It was like an RPG system. We have a little character with weapons and inventory management. You explore the world and go on quests and fetch something here and drop it off there, and you get some money in return. And it was a fascinating little game for young impressionable James. And then at some point there was something in my head that went like, okay, hang on, why don't it would be cool if this game could do more things. So obviously as a kid I couldn't program or code or change the game itself. So my solution to that was to say, okay, but let's make like a board game version of this to try it out. And then from there it was so the board game always relied on, okay, but I need people to play with me, because it was like a multiplayer thing. You have a little character. It's like a D&D session type thing. Yeah, me as a 13-year-old reinventing the wheel, I guess. And then at some point in time, I realized, okay, but I need people to play this, so I don't always have friends around. Why don't I just write the stories, write my own stuff? And at that point in time, I was reading a lot of fantasy stuff from the public library close to us, and they had these very interesting choose your own adventure stories. It was initially I think the Fighting Fantasy series by Jackson and Livingston, where you start as a character and then you make choices. And then if you want to turn left, you go to chapter 80. If you want to turn right, you go to chapter 120. Okay, whatever. And then you sort of navigate your way through the book. And those were fascinating for me. This idea of a story that is it's not a fixed static page 1 to 350. You go on your own. There's an element of creativity and choice in it. So those were very, I want to say, formative for me as a young reader.
Can I interrupt you for just 1 second? Because one of my most formative experiences growing up was called interactive fiction. Have you heard of that before? Games like Zork from Infocom. This was a company that spawned right when the PCs were becoming consumer products. So I had an Apple IIe computer in like 86, 87. Had a floppy drive, didn't even have a hard drive. And it was a 14.4 or 28K floppy disk. And that's all the space. And they were programmed on Lisp or basic programming languages. And you would type, there'd be a glowing screen, the monochromatic monitor, C prompt / and then you would type the run Zork, and it would run the game.
Yeah.
And then it would open. You are standing in front of a white boarded house. There's a mailbox here. And then you would type. It would have
Open
a flashing
mailbox.
cursor say, open the mailbox. And then opening the mailbox reveals a leaflet. And then you'd say, read the leaflet. And then the entire story was this interactive. You were part of literature. You were the character. You were the protagonist in the novel. And they had a fantasy, and they had a detective story, and then they had Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Are you familiar with Douglas Adams' book?
Yes.
Douglas Adams collaborated with these software developers and writers to create the Hitchhiker's version of this interactive. Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I had an identical experience growing up, only this was with computers. And to this day, it's one of my fondest memories is those Infocom games.
Yeah. No, it's great. I think it's an experience that our current, I want to say, modern generation has completely missed, because they only have computers. Everything is on a computer,
and everything's visual. There was only
these were
text. They didn't have enough memory for graphics.
Yeah. Everything was it was a text-based adventures. Yeah, I've played some of them as well. I remember them being very challenging for a young James. I had a lot of trouble with them.
They were hard.
They were hard. But they were great because they created this. So the PC games, the very old ones, the choose your own adventure books as well. They foster a sense of curiosity, of questions, because you play through the adventure one way, and then when you get to the end, you always think to yourself, but hey, what what would have happened if I'd done something different? And then you play through it again. So they had great repeat value.
In Project Hail Mary, Andy Weir has an Easter egg from Zork from that game. There's an Easter egg. I think it's on page 28. I took a picture of it and I posted it on the social medias.
Oh, yeah.
He describes twisty little passages all alike. That's an
Okay.
iconic reference, Easter egg to Zork from Infocom. And I
Okay.
actually looked it up online on Reddit. They have the forums, and other
Mm.
people noticed it too.
Ah,
So
nice.
thank you,
Nice.
Andy, for that. Yeah.
Throwback to 1986. Let's go. Yeah. So those books and sort of the PC games as well were they had a formative influence on me. And then at some point I just transitioned. It was a very natural transition then to start, hey, but let's start writing your own stories. And at first I wrote fan fiction. So you use characters from an established universe. Because you know the universe, you love the universe, you know what the characters look like. So then writing the fan fiction is very easy, as sort of a, like your training wheels to get into writing. And then eventually the game got to a point where I was like, no, but I have my own ideas for own characters and own settings and things. And then it just expanded from there. And then it just never really stopped, I guess. I was always, whatever I was doing, I was just always writing things. I really enjoyed it. I found it fascinating. I worked in corporate for 11 years at a finance company, investment company. And it was so frustrating for me when I was initially there because I was fresh out of university, working at the company now. And I was used to creative writing, where you sort of, I don't want to say you embellish, but you make the writing sound interesting. And then you have corporate reporting, which is dry and factual and to the point, no embellishments, no ambiguity, very like focused and dotted. And so I was like, oh, so learning that skill was interesting, but that also, it was a valuable lesson because then you learn how to structure information. Obviously, if you have a dense mass of information that you need to sort of structure and parse out in such a way that you can present it to management in 2 pages instead of 40 pages, that's a great skill to have, because as a fiction writer, then if you have a complex idea, if you then have the ability to take 40 pages of exposition and explanation and condense that down into 2 pages of structure and focus that still gets the message across, that's a great help. So that was sort of a side bonus of working in corporate for more than 10 years. And then my first paid writing gig was actually, I was writing, it was for one of the Choose Your Own Adventure IPs. And they were publishing, basically supporting material for the IP. So new character classes. That was the one thing that I did quite a lot of. I wrote new characters. So I took existing villains from the adventures and wrote them up as full playable character classes. So it's fan fiction, but I was in contact with the community at the time, and inside the fan community, one of the editors who was in charge of the official publishing, the editor was involved there. So I connected with him, we spoke a bit, and then at one point the topic came up of, hey, why don't you submit some of your characters as official IP and then we can get it published. So that happened about, I want to say 10, 15 years ago. And that was actually the first time I got paid for writing. I would write an article, let's say 4 or 5 pages, and then I would get paid. It was like between 40 and 80 euros at the time for an article. And I was ecstatic about it because it was a universe or an intellectual property that I loved and that I knew really well. I really enjoyed the writing for it. The editor enjoyed my work. He made minimal changes and then got it published. And I got paid for it. So I was through the roof. I was like, hey, this is a perfect gig. Then in time, things changed. The IP changed. There was a change in ownership. New editors came on. And yeah, the mood sort of changed a bit. The new editors had other ideas. They took the IP in different directions. And I started feeling a bit disconnected from it. I realized it's not the same world that I fell in love with. It was going in the new direction is not bad. It appeals to a different audience. And I think this circles back to our previous point about, as a writer, as your content changes, your audience will also change. So I experienced that firsthand as a writer in it, because I was writing sort of still the classic vision of the IP, but the IP had moved on, and I felt increasingly out of place, and the editors were also no longer interested in the more classic content. So I was like, okay, I'm going to call it quits. I'll just walk out. And then a while back, I also, I want to say about 2 years back, I discovered Substack as a platform for writing, because I had this, I was getting on in years now, and we were moving between properties, and while I was packing up, I discovered a pen, a very fancy Parker ballpoint pen that someone had given to me when I turned 21, had been engraved and everything. And I still remember the person who gave it to me, because at the time, fresh out of school, still in university, I was always talking about my writing and how much I want to be a writer and all that stuff. And the person gave the pen was a birthday gift, and the person said, when you publish your first book within a year or two, use this pen, sign it, and then send me a copy. And I was like, yeah, I'll do it. And I was packing boxes to move now between the properties, and I looked at this pen and I realized, you know what? I got this pen more than 15 years ago, and I still haven't written that damn book. And that, for me, that pen, finding that pen again between all my junk, that was kind of the wake-up call to say, like, hey, you've been promising to do this for more than 15 years now. When are you actually going to do it? And coinciding with the move, I was sort of leaving. It was part of the move of coming to Europe. I was leaving a lot of sports groups and friends behind, and arriving here in Europe was very much a new slate, new book, new chapter, new fresh page type thing. And at that point in time, I kind of made the decision and said, you know what? I don't have anything else that's now taking up my time and giving me these perfect, between air quotes, excuses to not write. So that for me was kind of the big reset to say, you know what? I have a clean break now. I have a fresh opportunity now to really focus my energy on the things that I've really been meaning to do for more than 15 years. Let's make it happen now. So that was, no, it was more than 2 years. It was 2023. That's kind of when I did my reset, and I said, okay, screw everything else. I'm going to focus on my writing now. I'm going to get on the social media. So I did this research, found Substack, registered. Substack back 2 years ago was very different from now. And then I started cranking. And I get so much energy now just from writing. Like when I finish a story, I'm sitting here, I'm buzzing with energy. I'm just like, this was so nice. I love this so much. And then I get to drop it on Substack. Some people like it. Some people don't. They don't comment. I don't care. I got my energy from writing it. And that's, one of our previous points, talking about, the things that give you energy, like you do with your social engagements, if you can call it that. For me, it's the act of writing, sitting down and producing something, and that finish at the end when the story is done, and I can save the document, put a date on it.
If you go to my Substack homepage, I've got, I don't know, 800 posts, screenplays, plays, op-ed pieces, everything. So I am a writer also. I was just highlighting my bloviation.
Mookie, after 2.5 hours, admits that he's also a writer. Okay, cool. We have that on record now.
I admit I'm also a writer. But I get that satisfaction too, which is great. Yeah. I love the pen story.
Yeah, the pen story for me was a wake-up call, and it also it was part of that. One of my previous points about, if you want the prize, you have to pay the price, and in this case, the price was, I'm losing friends, I'm losing communities, I'm disconnecting from people. But the prize that I want is I'm going to do my writing. And like you said also earlier, it's like, you're shouting into the void, and you hope that you get noticed, you hope that you go viral. And that would be nice, yes. Get the money, not the fame, not so much, but get the money. But for me, the big energy thing is writing and pushing that story out and sharing it with my friends. And I have a proofreader. He's actually from a completely different community, not from the writing community at all. But he reads every time I publish something on Substack, then I send him the link, and I'm like, hey, Lupus, give me some, just tell me what you think of the story. And he gushes. Every single story that I write, he loves. and he freaks out about it, and he tells him like, when are you writing a sequel? When's the next chapter coming out? Like he is the
fan editor.
Yeah, and he's just and like I don't expect him to be super critical or like give me like, the fine technical points of how to improve the writing, but he is literally just my little cheerleader, and I love him for it, because I think as a writer you need a minimum of one person cheering you on, if obviously aside from yourself, because you need to have a bit of confidence in your own writing as well. But if you just have that one cheerleader who will consistently just like give you that little boost, you put the writing in front of them, and then he goes, yes, this is fantastic, what, I loved it. That's great, that helps.
Sometimes that's all we
and
need.
then yeah, like self-confidence is super important. I think as an author you need to have confidence in your ideas, and you also need to have confidence in your writing ability, like your technical ability to sell and pitch a story. And if your technical ability is not that great, then you need to be open to advice. I think the worst thing that you can do is to have a low technical writing ability and then not be open to suggestions on how to improve it. Because I see a lot of people on Substack, fantastic people, lovely people. It's always a pleasure to engage with them. When they write, they have fantastic ideas, they have fantastic worlds and concepts and stories. But the technical ability to tell a story is not quite there, and then everything else suffers. It's like it's like a racing car. You have a fantastic engine, but everything else on the car is subpar. And it's like, yeah, okay, you have a fantastic engine here, my friend, but you're not going to win races. I'm sorry, you do have a bit of a technical problem here. Yeah. Anyway, so that's a long way of saying, but that's kind of how I got into writing and stayed in writing. Yeah.
And the essence of it, you felt the bug early, to the point where somebody gave you a pen to sign the book that you didn't write, reminding you 15 years later that you hadn't written it yet.
Yeah.
So time to step up and go for it.
Cool.
Yeah, and going back to David Mamet, he said some people make it early, some people make it midstream, some people later, some people kind of make it, some people become a star, but sooner or later, if you just stick to it, you'll get it done, and the universe will show you a little something for your effort. Could be a little, could be a lot. But to the point we were both making earlier, if it's intrinsically rewarding, then it's mission accomplished for the most part.
I think this is also a point that I want to tie into your previous comment. Your writer friend, who the guy who earns 10,000 a month, but he spends 5,000. He has 60 books available. I think as an author, I always think of your publishing repertoire or your selection. It's a bit like a restaurant menu, right? If you walk into a restaurant and they only have one item on the menu, literally just one dish on the menu, a lot of people are going to walk in, they're going to look at the one item on the menu, and they're going to walk out again because it's not what they want. If your menu has 60 items on it, 60 different meal options, you are more likely to get clients who walk in and stay and buy something. So I think for us as authors, especially authors now with print on demand services like Amazon, get titles out, get as many dishes possible on your menu. If you can publish a book a year, more than that, great. But if you can publish a book a year and say, hey, in 10 years time, I'm going to have 10 to 15 titles on my menu, then when someone finds you and they go through your menu, they don't see just one dish and like, oh, it's beef stew, I don't like beef stew, I'm going to go get Chinese somewhere else. If you have 15 options on your menu, you're going to retain a lot more customers. So yeah, that's something that I'm pushing forward. So one of the original points that we discussed was I've got the main novel that I'm working on, and then I have the short stories, usually for Sci-Friday, every Friday on Substack. Whenever I have 80,000 words worth of short stories together, I bundle that into a short story collection. It's about 240, 250 pages. And then I put that on Amazon. So I released my first anthology in September of last year, 2025.
I saw that.
Yep. So plug here for Impact Nominal. Collection of was 26 short stories. And I'm planning to do another one this year. Again, just all the short stories, put them together, put them on Amazon. And the more items you have on your menu, like I said, the more likely you are that someone finds it.
Yeah, totally agree. I've recently published a play, corporate
Mm.
satire, that I wrote 10 years ago. And
Okay.
it still sticks. It still bites. It's great. And I dug that up. And then a novella that I wrote just before the pandemic, I wrote it. And it's a memoir going back to the 90s. I just published
Mm.
both these books in the past 2 months. And
Oh,
I'm
congrats.
doing what you're doing, which is repurposing. I'm gonna publish dispatches from the Mookie verse, which will be my short story collection. And then I'm also breaking it into categories. So I have short stories about romance and love.
Mm. Mm.
I have short stories about work. I have short stories about politics. I'm
Mm.
going to arrange these as well and then release them. Package and repackage. I've got the sequel to Fazuli. And then now I've got this spin-off of the Alien Kitty that I'm working on. So just try different stuff. Keep cranking. Keep
Yeah.
staying frisky. Continue to mutate like an
Yeah.
organism,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
continue
Absolutely.
to adapt to your environment. Have fun with what you do. Feel the joy in creation.
Mm.
And it's the oldest cliche, but it's a cliche because it's true, which is if it feels good, then do it more. And if it feels
Yeah.
good to write and to release, it's a great thing
Yeah.
to have.
Yeah. And just build your menu. I mean, I think print on demand is going to see some changes in the coming months or years because of the AI tsunami. We see it already with the new proposed changes on draft to digital, with fees that are now going to be charged, things like that. And I think because the publishers, whether it's traditional publishing or print on demand, they all have this problem with the AI slop tsunami. So these changes will come in, and I think we just need to, like you said, keep evolving, adapt to it.
How do you use AI? Do you use AI at all for
I
your
don't
work?
use it at all. No, um, no, zero AI. I'm not one of those, I want to say, rabid anti-technology AI theorists. The people who scream and panic.
AI Luddite.
I'm not in that camp at all. I find those people a bit strange. I understand that, 40 years of being exposed to the Terminator franchise has given people a healthy dose of respect for the idea that AI can take over and mess things up. I understand where it's coming from. I really do. Um, but I'm not quite in that camp of like, oh, go burn down the data centers. I think the economics behind it is strange and unsubstantiated. I think there is the equivalent of a dot-com bubble busy with the AI stuff. Like your example, a shoe company suddenly pivoting to AI, and then their shares go up 560%.
I just had a friend and a colleague, former colleague. We just talked on the phone just before you and I got on the podcast. He had an
Mm-hmm.
HR company, human resources, for
Mm.
vetting candidates. And now he has declared he's an AI company too. So he said, Mookie,
It's the
guess
dot-com
what?
bubble all
He
over
said,
again.
guess what? And I'm like, what? He goes, I'm pivoting. We're AI now. And I was like,
Another one.
yeah,
Yay.
go for it. Oh, he's a nice guy. He's the only one who really cared. When I was finishing up my novel last summer, like pretty much a year ago, it was April, May 2025. I didn't leave my apartment and I worked 18-hour days. I'm not kidding. It was full immersion.
Wow.
It was commando. It was one of
Mm.
the hardest and greatest periods of my whole life. It lasted about 9 weeks, and complete
Wow.
immersion. I was eating enough to sustain myself, excreting, sleeping 3-4 hours, and the rest was all finishing the book.
Mm.
I didn't leave the house, and I live with my younger son, and he doesn't really do anything. He's great. He goes to work. He's taking flight lessons, but he doesn't go grocery shopping. So I was eating through all the pandemic leftovers, like cans of beans, and then this friend of mine, Sean, brought over grocery bag full of food to feed me while I'm working on the book. And I thought that was very endearing. I'll never forget him bringing this over. Now I'm so happy he's got an AI company. I I wish him well.
Yeah. Well, listen, if he does grocery deliveries to writers, that could be that's a market niche
That could
right
be
there.
like DoorDash, like like M dash.
Yeah. So you get you get
M dash, the
yourself.
AI delivery company for writers. M dash.
Yeah, you should patent that. You should patent that idea or trademark that.
Well, .coms are useless now. There's the websites are going away too. Why are you going to build a website when you could just pump your info right into a bot? I think the
Changing
internet's
world.
going to change, go away too. Ladies and gentlemen, James Kenwood.
All right, Mookie, thank you for having me.
Thank you for this lively and wonderful conversation. Well, thanks so much for listening. Like, comment, subscribe, share. Find James on Substack, follow him, subscribe to him.